Hey everyone! I want to share a story about my mean mother-in-law and my not-so-great husband who didn't stand up for me. I'm going to use fake names to keep things private. Let's pretend my name is Peyton, my husband is Grant, and my mother-in-law is Joanne. There's also my grandma Lily, who helped me through tough times. Let me start from the beginning. Grant was a pretty good boyfriend. I loved him a lot and was excited when he proposed. But things got rough after that. Grant started showing signs that worried me. I found out he was super close to his mom Joanne, as she had a lot of control over him. Joanne was the first problem. She lived with us and relied on Grant for everything. One day, she showed up with some papers and told me to sign them right away. "What are these papers for, Joanne?" I asked. "This is an ironclad prenup that you both need to sign. It says that in case of a divorce, neither of you can ask for anything from the other. Sign it now," she demanded. "Wait a minute. Did you make a prenup without talking to us? That's really embarrassing, Joanne." "Why would you do that?" I protested. "I did it so you can't take my son's things if you get divorced. You make less money than him, and this house belongs to him. We can't trust you not to try to take everything." "This is crazy, Peyton. I'm not as bad as you say. This is ridiculous. I won't sign a prenup like this. I feel offended." "You should have discussed this with us," I argued. "Actually, I know about the prenup. It's not a big deal, Peyton. If you're really not with me for money, you shouldn't have any problem signing this," Grant interrupted. I was surprised that Joanne and Grant had talked about it without telling me. I wasn't with Grant for money, but I hadn't told him about my inheritance yet. Grant and I argued for days, and Joanne kept insulting me for not signing the papers. Eventually, I turned to my grandma for help. She listened and said, "Are you sure you want to marry this man, Peyton? I don't think he's right for you. You two aren't even married yet, and he's already teaming up with his mother against you. It's just this one issue, Grandma. I truly love Grant, and he loves me too. I can't imagine being with anyone else. He's a good guy," I defended. "Well, if you've already made up your mind, I suggest you go ahead and sign the prenup. I'll have my lawyer review it first though. But I have one request. Don't tell anyone that your grandparents are wealthy. I haven't told them anything yet," Grandma advised. "But why shouldn't I tell them?" I asked. "I understand things better than you, Peyton. You're seeing them through rose-colored glasses. Your grandfather and I worked hard for this fortune. I don't want anyone taking advantage of you and stealing your money," Grandma explained. "You don't have to worry, Grandma. I won't tell him anything since you asked me not to. Plus, Grant is a good man, and he'd never do that. If his mother gets too much, I'm sure he'll protect his wife," I reassured. I was wrong though. Grant was awful, and his mother was worse than I knew. I gave in and signed the prenup, and later realized it was a smart move. Right after we got married, Joanne started abusing me regularly. Even with the prenup, she verbally and sometimes physically abused me. I'm too ashamed to talk about everything she did. But I'll share one incident that was a turning point in my marriage. One day, when I got home from work, Joanne barged into my room with a smirk. She handed me a big bag of clothes and ordered me to wash them. I didn't argue because I was used to this treatment. I knew if I refused, she'd tell Grant, and then they'd both verbally abuse me. So, I picked up the heavy bag, even though it was tough for me. As I walked down the hall, Joanne purposely tripped me, and I fell. I hurt my ankle badly and screamed in pain. Joanne just laughed and left after giving me an ice pack for my ankle. I called Grant. "Grant, I fell and hurt my ankle. Your mother tripped me today. I've endured her abuse for too long. You need to do something. She's gone too far." "Don't make up stories about Mom, Peyton. She wouldn't do that. You just want her out of the house and don't want to do chores. Stop lying and saying bad things about my mom," Grant argued. "I'm not lying, Grant. Please trust me. Don't ignore what I'm saying," I begged. Grant just hung up on me. He never defended me and always acted like I was the problem. I stayed quiet because I didn't want him to leave, but this time I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. I was secretly seeing a therapist with my grandma's help because their abusive behavior was too much to handle. It was clear I had to leave. What made me even angrier was Joanne sending me nasty texts, saying I deserved what she did, and Grant never standing up to her. I was furious. I decided I needed revenge, and the chance came later. When my grandma passed away, I was sad but also relieved because she was in a lot of pain. I couldn't bear seeing her suffer. I stayed strong, thinking she was finally at peace with my granddad. Grant didn't offer any support when she passed. He didn't even come to the funeral. But he found out I inherited $250 million. Yes, they were that wealthy. Grant was shocked. He suddenly started being really nice to me when we got home. The next day, I woke up to another surprise. Joanne was standing at the foot of my bed, looking at me sweetly. I was shocked to find her in my room, staring at me strangely. I didn't know what to make of it. I had a feeling something like this might happen, but seeing my abusive mother-in-law's face change was starting to creep me out. I said, "Why are you here, Joanne? No one told me you were coming today. And why were you staring at me while I was sleeping?" "Oh, I came early to help you with chores. I made you some tea, it's right by your bed." "I know how much you love tea, so I got a special batch for you," she said sweetly. "You didn't answer why you were in my room while I was sleeping. Honestly, Joanne, it's really creepy. I was just trying to massage your feet, Peyton. I know you hurt them when you fell carrying my laundry. Your feet must be sore, so I thought I could help," she explained. "You're the one who tricked me that day, Joanne. How dare you come in here and try to massage my feet? Have you no shame?" I exclaimed. Now, don't overreact. It was just a mistake. I didn't have you fall or that the laundry was so heavy. I already massaged your foot to make up for it, didn't I?" she replied. "Do you really think massaging my foot makes up for all the abuse you've put me through? You're out of your mind, Joanne. Get out of my room. I don't want to see your face right now," I demanded. "All right, I'll be in the kitchen making you breakfast. You don't have to worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything, including making sure Grant has everything ready. You just take your time and freshen up," she said sweetly before leaving. Her sudden change of behavior left me feeling unsettled. Even as I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had invaded my privacy and was acting strangely. Money can make people do strange things, you know. Joanne is a perfect example. Grant must have told her to be nice to me to avoid any issues with my inheritance, which probably prompted her visit. But neither Grant nor Joanne knew that they wouldn't get their hands on my fortune. I had made sure of that. I got out of bed and dressed in my best clothes. It was my day for revenge, and I wanted to look my best. My therapy had been helping, and I finally had the confidence to stand up for myself. I went down to the kitchen with my bag in hand. Inside were some important documents I needed to send out today. I think you can guess what I was about to do. I found Grant and Joanne in the kitchen, looking very pleased and whispering to each other. When they noticed me, their smiles widened even more. Grant pulled out a chair for me while Joanne started preparing a plate for me. I said, "Why did you make breakfast today? I could have done it myself." "You didn't have to go through the trouble." "It's no trouble at all, Peyton. I'm happy to do this for you. It's just breakfast. My mom can help out. You don't have to worry about any chores from now on. Once we sell the house and move to a mansion, I'll hire a housekeeper. Until then, my mother can take care of everything. I'll help her too. You think buying my medicines is a waste of money, but suddenly hiring a housekeeper is affordable for you. And how do you plan to buy a mansion? Robbing a bank lately?" I retorted. "Don't be absurd. We have enough money to do anything we want now." "You just inherited a lot from your grandmother," Grant replied confidently. "Yes, Grant's right. Finally, we're rich. We don't have to worry about money anymore. Your inheritance will last us the lifetime. We can do whatever we want now," Joanne added. "Yeah, I've been thinking about quitting my job. I was getting burnt out here anyway. Maybe we can take a vacation and have some fun. What do you think?" Grant added. I burst into laughter at their words. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It had only been a day since I got my inheritance and they were already making plans. They really thought I'd just hand over the money and let them do whatever they wanted. As if pretending to be nice would erase years of abuse from my husband and mother-in-law. Joanne and Grant looked uncomfortable with my laughter, trying to avoid eye contact. Maybe even they realized how ridiculous their plans sounded, holding on to the hope that I'd forgive them magically. After laughing for a moment, I said, "Wow, it's only been a day since I got my inheritance and already you're changing your tune so drastically. Money really does make a difference, doesn't it? Let's not dwell on the past now. We had no idea this good fortune was coming our way. We would have treated you better if we knew. Keeping secrets from your husband and in-laws isn't right, Peyton. That was sneaky of you. Anyway, what should we do with all this money?" I was thinking of buying a house and going on a Caribbean vacation. "Don't just say house, Grant. Say mansion or villa. We could even get a penthouse. It would suit our new status better. We're millionaires now after all. All my friends would be so jealous, Joanne added excitedly. I listened to their chatter and casually took out the documents I'd been hiding in my folder. Joanne and Grant looked at me expectantly, as if I was about to hand them papers saying all the money was now theirs, but they were in for a shock. I held the papers in my hand and said, I need to correct you both. We're not millionaires. I am. The money is mine, and I inherited it. Yes, you got the money, but we share everything. We're married, so you should share your money with me, Grant insisted. And as your mother-in-law and your only family right now, you should share the money with me too. We're family after all. You're my daughter as much as Grant is my son, Joanne added. It's ironic how suddenly I've become your daughter, Joanne. Until yesterday, I was just a witcher's son married. Anyway, don't get too carried away. We won't be family anymore. Not that we ever really were, I retorted. What do you mean, Peyton? I'm your mother-in-law, so I am family, Joanne protested. How could you be my mother-in-law when I won't be married to your son anymore? If Grant loses his title as my husband, you'll mean less than nothing to me, I replied firmly. What's going on, Peyton? Why won't I be your husband anymore? What's this about? Grant demanded. Well, I filed for divorce. I did it the day after my grandma died. I won't be staying with you anymore, Grant. You're a terrible husband and don't deserve to be one, I declared. With that, I threw the divorce papers on the table. Grant and Joanne both read the papers to see if I was telling the truth. When they finished reading, their eyes widened in disbelief. They looked at each other with worry, realizing the seriousness of the situation. I guess they didn't think I'd have the courage to file for divorce. They said, "What's this, Peyton? Why are you filing for divorce? This doesn't make any sense. You think I'm weak enough to stay in an abusive marriage forever? Why are you surprised, Grant? I warned you this was coming. I told you the day Joan tricked me. My God, why are you still dwelling on the past? I've already apologized for it, and it's over. You need to be more forgiving. This isn't enough reason for a divorce. Mom has already made up for that," Grant argued. So you, Joan, admit to tripping me and all you say is to get over it? Well, listen up, guys. I'm divorcing both of you and you won't get a penny of my inheritance. I can't believe I fell in love with such a horrible man like you, Grant. I'm ashamed I tried so hard to impress a monster like you, Joanne. But this abuse stops now. We're definitely getting a divorce, and we can do this the easy way or the hard way, I asserted. Suddenly, Grant and Joanne looked furious with me. I guess they didn't like being called out for their behavior. They knew I was serious about the divorce since I'd already filed for it. It wasn't a threat to get what I wanted. They were now willing to comply with my wishes because I had a lot of money. What's the point of divorcing me, Peyton? You have more money than me because your inheritance is our marital asset. I'll get half of it anyway. You might have half, but most of it will be spent on the lawyer. Did you forget about the prenup we were forced to sign? Your dear mother-in-law can remind you of it. She insisted we sign it, Grant retorted. It suddenly hit them that they'd screwed themselves over. Back then, they never imagined I'd become a millionaire. They wanted to protect themselves because they knew no reasonable woman would stay with them after their abuse. The prenup was their way of avoiding consequences for their actions. But this time, they'd only hurt themselves. They'd dug their own graves. The prenup was in the past. I'll consult a lawyer and see what options we have. We won't let you walk away with all that money. You're just using this to threaten us. You can't do anything to us, Peyton. We'll take your money and do as we please with it, Joanne snapped. So, you're planning to fight me in court? Don't worry, Peyton. We'll make this tough for you. You can't make decisions on your own. I'll fight you in court. You can't get divorced without my signature, remember that? Grant threatened. Really, Grant? You're going to deliberately make things difficult for me? That's not a problem. I'm prepared for anything. I have some tricks up my sleeve, I countered. What do you mean, Peyton? Joanne asked nervously. Joan, remember how you confessed to tripping me and abusing me in those texts? Well, I'll use them to file a report with the police. That could be quite an event, wouldn't you say? I stated calmly. No, you can't do that. You can't do that to me. That's impossible. I'll delete all the texts. Don't worry, Joanne stammered. Danon, I have all the texts saved and sent to some of my friends. Trust me, I'm perfectly capable of reporting you to the police. And I can also show how Grant knew and did nothing to help me. It'll be an uphill battle for you in divorce court, I threatened. Joanne and Grant immediately started apologizing profusely. They'd forgotten that I had the power to put Joanne in jail. They thought I'd moved on from the incident, but I'd been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to use it. Joanne and Grant were in deep trouble. They didn't know what to do. I took the divorce papers with me and left the house. I'd collect my things the next day. Grant and Joanne tried to stop me, saying, "Don't leave, Peyton. Let's sit down and talk about it. We can handle this like adults and not make any rash decisions. And where will you even go? You have to stay here anyway. Let's discuss it." I'm moving into my grandmother's house. It's already been transferred to my name. I'll be living there while I wait for Grant to decide on the divorce. I'm taking the papers with me so you can't damage them and force me to file again. And as for my belongings, I've taken pictures of everything. Don't even think about damaging or getting rid of anything, I replied firmly. Grant and Joanne continued trying to stop me, but I had already called a friend who was waiting for me outside. I got into her car and drove off with her. Grant and Joanne watched us from the door the whole time. After arriving at my new place, I contacted a moving company to bring my belongings from the house. In the following months, Grant and Joanne tried their best to change my mind, but I kept reminding them about going to the police. Since Grant hadn't signed the divorce papers, he talked to a lawyer who informed him that the prenup was solid and he had no way out. After being threatened by me multiple times, Grant was forced to sign the divorce papers. He didn't want his mom to go to jail, and he knew I would never give him another chance. Grant didn't take the divorce well and started blaming Joanne for causing problems between us. He believed she was the reason he missed out on becoming a millionaire. After numerous fights, he ended up kicking her out with nothing. Since Joanne depended on Grant's money, she was left homeless and without resources. Last I heard, Joanne was in a homeless women's shelter, unsure of what to do next. I informed everyone about how awful Joanne and Grant are, so they've been isolated from others. No one really talks to them anymore. As for me, I'm enjoying my new life and watching the aftermath unfold. I still stay at my grandma's place because it holds sentimental value for me. With my inheritance, I've donated some money to women's help centers and plan to do more for them. The rest of the money has been invested and secured for my future family. I still work at my old job because I don't want to sit idle. Life is good so far, and I'm hopeful I'll meet someone who deserves me.
I'm the CEO's daughter. Old hag, make me a coffee. The new employee, Avery, who got in through connections, looked at me with a mocking expression and treated me like an old woman. Sure, I'm 5 years older than you, but I'm still in my 20s. That's not the point, though. It's a problem that she doesn't do any work and does whatever she wants. When I pointed that out to her, "I'm going to tell Dad and get you fired." What an unreasonable and absurd logic. "Chloe, are you okay?" My concerned boss, Victoria, asked, and I responded with a smile. "Why are you smiling?" "Because she doesn't understand anything." "That's true." Victoria agreed, looking convinced. "All right, time to fight back against this spoiled CEO's daughter who is too naive about the real world. I'm Chloe, 28 years old, working at a large manufacturing company. I've been employed for 6 years and feel a sense of fulfillment despite the busy days. I'm blessed with great colleagues, and although there's an age gap, I'm particularly close with Victoria, who is 41. She is my admirable boss who works while raising her 8-year-old daughter, always considerate of others. Currently, what troubles me is the presence of a new employee, Avery, who is 23. She's the daughter of an important client, and she got in through connections. Apparently, her father asked our executive director to take her in. He wanted her to gain some social experience and learn the harshness of the world outside his company, where she would inevitably be treated as the CEO's daughter. The overall training for new employees ended, and departmental training began, and I was appointed as her mentor. I thought it would be a valuable experience for me as well, so I took it on positively. However, she was late on her first day. Her outfit was flashy and revealing, with heavy makeup and nails. It seemed completely wrong for work. Moreover, her manners and greetings were terrible. What? A mentor? I don't need one. I'm finally done with the annoying overall training, so I can just look around wherever I want, right? I almost stumbled. This isn't an elementary school workplace tour. No, that's an insult to elementary school kids. While I was thinking that, "Chloe, how old are you?" she suddenly asked. What? I'm 28. 28? Old hag. You better get married soon, or you'll hit 30. Your clothes and makeup are so out of style, nothing to admire. She started like this right away. I don't care about me, but you should dress more modestly. Remove those nails by tomorrow. What? Why? It's fine if it's a light color or plain, but with all that glitter and stones, I can't take you on outside appointments. But I just had these done at the nail salon. You wouldn't understand, old hag, but they cost a lot. Forcing me to remove them would be a problem. What? What kind of thought process is this? We're supposed to be from the same generation, but I can't relate at all. Maybe growing up as a CEO's daughter makes her think differently. Even if she got in through connections, she still needs to do her job properly. I was frustrated but told myself to stay calm. First, I'll teach her the job and gradually build trust. Then, her attitude should change. However, she quickly betrayed my expectations. She has no motivation at all. She never read the documents I gave her, and whenever I asked her to do copies or data entry, she had the part-time employees do it behind my back. I heard about it from Victoria, who is in charge of the part-timers. Moreover, she claimed to be the daughter of a CEO from one of our clients and spoke in a way that made it hard for others to oppose her. There were other issues too. She'd disappear to the restroom and not return for an hour, or leave early in the evening without notice. Talking to her about these issues was futile. I grew more and more exhausted every day. Any questions so far? No. Were you paying attention? Yes. You haven't taken any notes. Notes? In this day and age? You can look up anything online. Maybe that's too advanced for you, old hag. There's only a 5-year age difference between us. I had to bite back my irritation. Sure, the internet is convenient, and I often have people use it to find information. But the experience and knowledge specific to our company are very important. Passing down this information from superiors helps build relationships with clients. It's crucial for handling new projects too. She sneered at me. You're really annoying, just like those awful people you always find in workplaces. What? By the way, I want James to be my mentor. What? He's handsome and my type. I'd actually pay attention if he were my mentor. James is the star of the sales department. He doesn't have time for training newbies. Then I'll just tag along. You said we could choose training based on our interests, right? That's meant for interests in products or proposals we visit. Oh? Are you saying my enthusiasm is a problem for you? No, but James was my mentor when I was a rookie. Handsome and competent, admired by many female employees. I was one of them. She didn't do her job but flitted around departments chatting up male employees. Now she had set her sights on James. She quickly went to James and his supervisor, arranging to shadow him on a sales call. I'm going to do my best tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. What exactly does she plan to do her best at? I felt a headache coming on. That evening, while I was working late, James returned from his rounds. Good work. You're still here? Training the newbie has been taking up my time, so my own work has fallen behind. Oh, that girl shadowing me tomorrow, right? I heard she's a handful from Victoria. It's no laughing matter. Despite my words, my voice was lighter talking to James after so long. He really was handsome. Talking to him felt like a balm to my stressed heart. For you to be struggling, she must be something. She really is. I'm sorry for the trouble tomorrow. Don't worry. Use the time to catch up on your own work. Yes. Also, just be careful. Of what? The next day, after she eagerly shadowed James, she was in a foul mood. Submit your report on yesterday's sales training. There's nothing to report. That can't be true. Just write the report. It's unnecessary. What do you mean? That's for regular employees who need to work hard. Do you really think I'm like the other newbies? What? I'm going to be the future CEO. I don't need to do the same work as ordinary employees. That's not a good attitude. Your father sent you here to learn properly, so you need to study. Study? There's nothing to learn from regular employees. Hey, old hag, hurry up and make some coffee. You know, enough is enough. I found myself speaking in a strong tone. Oh, scary. What do you think you're doing? Yelling at me in a private meeting room like this, it's a threat. What? I'll tell Dad. And I'll tell the executive here who is close with Dad. You're unfit as a mentor, and I'll get you fired. I was stunned. This was a matter of character. Using her status as the company president's daughter, she had no intention of doing her job. I've been trying to take her seriously, but I've reached my limit. Mocking those who work hard, doing whatever she pleases. I've had enough. I've made up my mind. If you want to tell them, go ahead. You should just apologize, but instead you act like this. You're finished. Just wait and see. I didn't say out loud which of us would be finished. Now, I have to go tell Dad. She glanced at me and left. It's not even work hours yet. When I returned to my seat, everyone was looking at me with concern. Even though it was a meeting room, it was just a corner of the floor, so they must have heard our exchange. Are you okay? She left saying you bullied her and she's going to sue. Victoria. I saw her behavior too. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. I'm fine. Thank you. The next day, she came to me with a triumphant look on her face. Dad and the executive want to see you. They said to come to the meeting room. The atmosphere became tense, and Victoria rushed to my side. This is bad, isn't it? I'll help you out. She pounced on Victoria's words. Another old hag coming to the rescue. Help? There's nothing a commoner like you can do. What? Come on, hurry up. She said and walked away. Victoria, did you hear that? Chloe, why are you laughing? Because she still doesn't get it. Yeah, we have to show her. Victoria said with a wink, agreeing with me. When I entered the meeting room, behind her were our executive and a client company's president, her father, Mr. Garcia. You're Chloe, Avery's mentor? Yes. Avery came to us saying that your excessive mentoring is causing her distress. After Mr. Garcia's words, the executive looked doubtful and spoke. I've heard you force her to do unreasonable work without teaching her how. That you verbally abuse her every day, is that true? That's not true. Avery doesn't do any work, doesn't listen when I talk to her, so I did caution her, but I never used abusive language. What? At my resolute attitude, the executive and Mr. Garcia looked at each other. without missing a beat.
Lies. She took me to sales meetings without any documents or briefings, making me embarrass myself on purpose, and told me to create data in an hour without teaching me how.
Avery interjected. You never listened or read the documents, right? I warned you many times and tried various ways to teach you, but you didn't listen. Moreover, you pushed your clerical work and data creation onto part-time workers, didn't you? At my orderly explanation, the executive and Mr. Garcia looked at each other and tilted their heads.
Hey, Avery. This isn't what I heard. Dad, who are you going to believe, me or this old hag?
What? Old hag? This person is still young and is your mentor. How can you talk like that to her? Mr. Garcia began to get confused, and I said, Avery leaves without notice, doesn't do any research or preparation, and I've heard several complaints about her saying rude things to customers and ruining business negotiations. What?
No way! Who's saying that?
Avery was in a panic. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Excuse me.
What?
It was James who walked in. I'll explain the issues with the client. I've also spoken to the subordinates and colleagues involved.
What are you talking about?
I wasn't planning to make an issue out of your troublemaking, but if you're lying to get a supervisor fired, that's a different story. James approached her with the confidence that came from his top position in sales.
It's not a lie. This guy is just saying this because I turned him down. Dad, look at this.
Avery showed her phone to everyone around her. It was a picture of her and James, apparently taken at a client meeting location.
This is the hotel lounge. After this, he forced me into his room. What?
Everyone was momentarily stunned by her sudden counterattack. James, is this true? Both the senior executive and Mr. Garcia raised their voices. James, the normally unflappable and reliable employee, couldn't possibly have done this, but the photo caused a stir. However, he firmly stated, It's the other way around. She was the one who tried to get me to go to the room, and I refused.
What? No! Dad, Mr. Senior Executive, you know who's telling the truth here, don't you?
Well, but... The senior executive knew James was an excellent employee. However, with Avery's convincing act and her beauty, it was hard to decide whom to believe. James sighed. I never thought this would actually come in handy. What? This time, he pulled out his phone. A recording of a conversation between a man and a woman played from the phone. Hey, come on, let's go to the room already. No way. I came because you said you had something to discuss about work. Don't be shy. James, you're special, so I booked a suite. If the chemistry is right, I'll make you my boyfriend. What nonsense are you talking about? And what was your attitude at the client meeting today? You didn't even read the materials I gave you. Work doesn't matter. Just treat me like a princess already. I absolutely won't, and I'm not interested in you like that. What? Are you trying to embarrass me? Do you know who my dad is? If you refuse, I'll cancel our deal. Are you threatening me? I'm the CEO's daughter. And the HR manager here does whatever I say, so I can affect your evaluation however I want. The HR manager? No way. After one date, he was hooked on me. He'll do anything I say. I need to lower the evaluation of that annoying supervisor too. The explicit content of the conversation caused an uproar. What is this?
How did you get this recording?
She turned pale. Chloe told me that Avery's behavior was unpredictable, so I recorded it just in case. Other employees have also been tricked or treated to expensive dinners. There are also subordinates who had to do her tasks and work. I can gather testimonies and evidence if necessary.
What is this?
She glared at me, spitting out nonsensical words.
This is your fault. I won't forgive you. Dad, cancel our business with this company and teach them a lesson.
What are you talking about? Mr. Garcia turned pale.
Dad, if we lose this deal, it'll be our company that suffers. What?
I've heard everything. A dignified voice rang out as our company president entered.
President!
The senior executive, Mr. Garcia, and everyone present straightened up. We allowed her to join because of our long-term relationship with her father's company and because she's the daughter of the senior executive's friend, but it seems we made a mistake.
I'm sorry. Avery caused trouble. Hey, apologize. What? Why? Why should I?
Avery seemed at a loss for what to do. Then, a woman's voice came from behind the president. You've taken advantage of your status as the president's daughter and learned nothing.
What?
Mr. Garcia's company is one of our important partners, but its scale is 10 times larger than ours. It's a different league. The voice belonged to Victoria. It seemed the president's appearance was a setup for Victoria's entrance.
Exactly. If we lose this partnership, it's our company that will be in trouble. You're here to learn, not to cause issues. What?
It seemed it was the first time Mr. Garcia had yelled at her, and she was on the verge of tears.
But why is that old hag here? Acting all high and mighty. A part-time leader shouldn't be speaking up.
You really don't know anything, do you? I shot back strongly.
What?
Not only are you ignorant, but you also don't listen to others.
What's your problem?
Victoria is the president's daughter. She's our company's president's daughter.
What?
Avery was stunned into silence.
How can this old hag, over 40, working hard despite having children, be the president's daughter?
It's because of your careless thinking that you're in this situation.
What?
Victoria, called an old hag, hit back. Even before I got married, I was often treated special as the president's daughter. But I worked hard to change that environment, building trust with those around me. Following Victoria's lead, I continued. As you said, Victoria doesn't need to work to live comfortably. But she didn't quit even after marriage and childbirth, and she has been leading efforts to create a better working environment for women. When I joined the company, Victoria's surname had already changed due to marriage, so I didn't initially know she was the president's daughter. She praised my work, and as we became close personally, she shared her background with me. Although it was well known within the company that she was the president's daughter, she never mentioned it herself, and now no one treats her differently. It's not because she's the president's daughter, but because of her work and personality that she is respected by everyone. The content of the recording will be reviewed by the head of HR. If it's true, he'll be disciplined as well. You must take responsibility for what you've done. The president effectively declared Avery's dismissal.
No, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong.
The president turned his back on her as she cried and screamed and left the scene. After that, Avery was, of course, dismissed from her position. She fled before her contract was officially terminated, though. Mr. Garcia repeatedly apologized, but the president ceased their business relationship. Avery was then sent to a remote town's factory, where she reportedly faced rigorous training from experienced supervisors. Under the strict guidance, without any favoritism towards her status as the president's daughter, she was probably realizing just how sheltered her life had been. I was relieved from the stress of training her, but was swamped with the backlog of work accumulated during her time here. Even so, I was happy to be able to focus purely on my work, and the overtime didn't bother me. And about a month later, when things had settled down, Victoria invited me to dinner.
Is it okay to go to such a nice place? My husband is watching our daughter tonight. It's been a tough time for you, hasn't it?
No.
I ended up being helped by you. Thank you again. You should have relied on me from the start. My status only comes in handy in situations like that.
She joked like that. Although she doesn't approve of using her position as the CEO's daughter, she doesn't hesitate to use it to help someone. I truly admire her straightforwardness.
Well, it's because you're working so hard on your own that I want to help you. Both James and I.
Victoria smiled meaningfully. I had previously told Victoria that I had feelings for James.
I was surprised that James came to the scene. He told me to contact him if anything happened to you. When I texted him, he rushed over. He really wanted to help you.
Victoria had a mischievous smile.
Why don't you confess your feelings soon? I thought I should wait until I become more competent. James is the ace of the sales department. If you keep saying that, someone else might become his girlfriend. How many years have you had a crush on him? And I think you're already competent enough. Right, James?
Huh? Following Victoria's gaze, I turned around to find James standing there.
Wait, what's going on?
I blushed in a panic.
Oh, are we three today? James, please come here.
Excuse me. As soon as James sat down, Victoria stood up.
Well, you two young people, enjoy your time. Huh?
James and I said simultaneously.
Wait, where are you going? I have to return to my beloved family. Oh, please start the course at this table.
Victoria happily told the waiter and patted James on the shoulder.
Well, I'll leave the rest to you. The bill is already paid.
James, who had been stunned until then, seemed to understand and nodded.
Thank you very much. See you.
Victoria left.
What, she really left? Were you also invited by Victoria today, James? Yes, she said we should celebrate a big contract. Really? Is it okay to have a feast without Victoria? What? Are you unhappy with just the two of us? Not at all.
I hurriedly denied it.
You really like Victoria, don't you?
Yes. Isn't she incredibly cool?
She is indeed cool. But I'm a bit jealous. Huh? James, you're also cool. Don't say it like it's an afterthought. I really think so. So how many years have you liked me?
From the beginning. Hey, wait a minute. James smiled mischievously.
Did you hear? Sorry, I heard.
Aware of my blushing face, I made up my mind.
It's okay, you don't have to say it.
Huh?
I'll say it after dinner. For now, let's enjoy the treat. Huh?
As I was dumbfounded, James smiled a little shyly. I can't believe it. I can't believe it, I can't believe it. But does this mean, could it be? Both Victoria and James are really cool people. It's a blessing to be recognized by people I respect. While chasing my beloved too, I will keep moving forward, just being myself. Even though I hadn't drunk a drop of alcohol, I thought about that with a red face. Take care of the kids for me. What do you mean, take care of them? Yosef said it so casually, but would I have accepted it if nothing had happened? I'm still not sure. Yosef was supposed to be on a business trip, but apparently, he got into an accident at his destination. I received a call and went to St. Helena, known for a resort. The sudden increase in business trips, happening several times a month, was suspicious. And an employee of a copier company getting into a traffic accident in a touristic place? Something was definitely up. While I was at the hospital thinking about all this, I ran into my sister, Emily. Why was Emily here? And why was she in this place with Yosef? Even in this clearly cornered situation, he thought he could still cover it up. It was infuriating. Did he think I would just let this slide? I have strong allies, so Yosef can't escape without consequences. He should face reality and reconsider his future actions. My name is Ivy. I'm a 33-year-old preschool teacher. After graduating from a community college in the state, I started working at a fairly large town's preschool. Being a preschool teacher is more challenging than I thought, but being around the always smiling children somehow cleanses my heart. However, since I'm always dealing with children at work, sometimes I crave conversations with adults. Even when I want to have age-appropriate conversations with adults, I look around and see dozens of children. There are a few fellow teachers, but in front of the children, we are always just teachers. Work is busy, and it's hard to find time to catch up with friends from college. I don't have time to make friends with shared hobbies either, so I'm always Mississippi Sanders when interacting with others. I interact and connect as a teacher, not as an adult in an adult conversation. At my workplace, the preschool, I am just a teacher and nothing more. One day, a senior colleague handed over the task of managing the copier at work. It was a job previously handled by a teacher going on maternity leave, and it fell to me, the one who seemed the most idle and timid. Honestly, managing the copier was just an additional burden. I wanted to leave work early and have fewer tasks, so to me, it was just a chore. Handling the copier management, on top of my usual work, was unbearable. Making sure the copier worked smoothly, refilling ink, managing the paper stock. These were the most troublesome tasks. But I never imagined that someone who would dispel my gloomy feelings would appear. In the early afternoon, the preschool bell rang, summoning the person in charge of the copier to the office. Since it was nap time for the children, I informed my partner teacher and headed to the office. "Excuse me, I'm here to check the copier." At that moment, I felt a reaction as if an electric current had run through me. I didn't know why, maybe his looks? His voice? There was something indescribable. "Oh, yes. I'm in charge. I took over from the previous person. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too. I'm from the copier company." My first impression of Yosef was strange. It wasn't the kind of feeling one usually has for a business contact. It was oddly familiar. "Oh, the girl from the morning. But you wouldn't know me. Do you sometimes stop by the convenience store near the bus terminal in the morning?" I remembered with that one sentence. "Oh, the one by the new snack section at the convenience store." Sometimes, I stop by the convenience store near the bus terminal to buy lunch or drinks. Depending on the day, I purchase different items, but when I go at a set time, there's always someone there. Just after entering the store, near the prominently displayed shelf of new products, stands a man intently choosing what to buy. That was him. "You know, I used to see you at the convenience store. I never imagined we'd meet like this." That's my line. I was curious about the new snacks, but I was also curious about the young lady I sometimes saw. Could such a thing really happen? Usually, I deal with children at work and have no opportunities to meet men, but I remember feeling a flutter in my heart at that moment. "I don't think it's appropriate to talk about work here. How about exchanging contact information? If you don't mind, that is." Of course, I don't mind. I'd be happy to. On the day I was meeting with the copier company representative, we ended up exchanging contact information out of the blue. That became the catalyst for us to gradually get closer. As we talked about daily happenings and amusing incidents, he became someone I was increasingly interested in. At first, it was love at first sight for me. But as I got to know Ivy, I realized that being with her made me feel so at ease. Please marry me.
I can't believe this day would come. I'm so happy.
I thought I would spend my life dedicated to my work, growing older, but happiness suddenly came to me. Meeting again with someone I had passed by casually in the city, deepening our connection, and moving towards marriage. At that moment, I was at the peak of happiness, but at the same time, I had another thought in my mind. I won't end up like my sister, Emily. I will seize my own happiness. That's what I whispered to myself. My sister, Emily, is 2 years older than me. People think we must be close because we're not far apart in age, but that's a complete misunderstanding. I am the quiet type, if I do say so myself. I'm average in studies and fashion, and I decided to become a childcare worker simply because I love being around children. On the other hand, Emily is my exact opposite and spares no effort in being fashionable. She's always thinking about how to stay beautiful and how to dress up. In terms of social hierarchy, she was at the top, always wearing the latest trends, belonging to a group that others admired. Perhaps because of her social circles, she was always in relationships with men since her school days. Since she got her first boyfriend in the first year of middle school, Emily never had a period without a boyfriend. Right after graduating high school, she moved out to live with her then boyfriend. Eventually, she settled down at 25 because she had a daughter, but soon got divorced. We're connected on social media, so I occasionally check if she's doing well. She continues to post photos of herself all dressed up, but they leave me feeling a sense of emptiness. More than being a mother, she can't stand not being number one. Just like in her childhood, her surface is decorated like a facade. It's not about showing others how happy I am. I believed that weaving a life filled with true happiness with Yosef was what mattered. Right after getting married, I was happy. I loved coming home to the person I adored, eating dinner together, and spending peaceful evenings. Sharing what happened that day and laughing together felt irreplaceable. However, at some point, Yosef's words started to bother me. It was because Yosef began commenting on my appearance and behavior. He seemed like the type who wanted to control people according to his own wishes, constantly meddling in things. At first, I tried not to let it bother me, but there are things one simply cannot endure. Hey, Ivy, don't you ever wear makeup? Oh, this? As a daycare worker, it tends to come off while taking care of the kids or playing with them, so I don't wear much. But showing up to work like that isn't right, is it? Is it really that strange? I've always dressed like this. That day, I was wearing a hoodie and jeans. Since I commute by bike to the daycare, I prioritize ease of movement and change into my work clothes before starting my shift, so there's no real problem. I've always commuted in this style. Most working women in their 30s don't go out in such casual clothes. It's like you're in loungewear. Really? I've always dressed like this, but why are you bringing it up now? He often complains about my clothes and belongings. Starting with my bag and outfit, he also criticizes my hairstyle and makeup, saying they're not feminine or appropriate for a working adult. Once, when we went out for lunch and stopped by a bookstore downtown, he picked up a women's magazine and said, "Hey, why don't you ever dress like this, Ivy?" It was a magazine targeting office ladies, with glamorous headlines and decorations on the cover. Winning dresses to catch his eye this summer, perfect $300 outfit for a summertime date, honestly, things far removed from my interests. Sorry, but I'm not really into this kind of thing. I don't wear such outfits for work, and they don't suit me. Oh, I see. So you have no intention of dressing to please me. With that, he became sulky. It's been 6 months since we got married, and just when he started saying strange things, he would suddenly get moody. I didn't understand what he wanted or was thinking. Since that day, our relationship has been somewhat strained. We only talk when necessary, with no room for enjoyable chats or lighthearted jokes. It feels like there's a cold breeze blowing between us. We haven't had a major argument, nor do I remember saying anything that warranted an apology. At this point, I can't pinpoint what caused the rift in our relationship. If there was a past argument or issue, we could work to resolve it, but honestly, I have no idea. If I had to guess, it might be because I refused to wear the clothes he wanted me to. Is that it? But since we live together, sharing the same space and time, there are moments when we can casually talk if the mood aligns. Just as a TV program about infidelity came on, we were watching together. The usual commentators and hosts were debating the definition of cheating and where the line between acceptable and unacceptable lies. Of course, I think cheating is absolutely unacceptable. I've even broken up with a past boyfriend because of his infidelity. Given that I don't tolerate cheating even in a dating relationship, I believe it's even less acceptable in a marriage to secretly engage with someone of the opposite sex. Casually, I brought up the topic with him. Hey, this TV show is talking about cheating.
Yeah, well, everyone's got their own take on what love is.
Love takes different forms, that's true. Then Yosef started talking like a machine gun, as if trying to convince me.
I mean, seriously? A marriage certificate, just one piece of paper, and you're not allowed to love anyone else ever again? Isn't that weird? I'm just saying, what's wrong with some freedom in love?
Frankly, Yosef's words didn't sound like those of a married person. It felt like there was something hidden behind them. He might have had a reason for saying something so out of character. After all, is Yosef the type of person who wants to continue pursuing romantic interests even after getting married?
And love isn't determined by the institution of marriage, but by the depth of your feelings, right? No matter how married you are, if you don't truly love the person, it's kind of pointless, isn't it?
Hearing him say something like that made me wonder what marriage meant to him, and more than anything, it cast a shadow over my heart. It felt as if those words were directed at me, and I couldn't bring myself to look Yosef in the eyes. How could I have fallen for someone who could say something so unbelievable without changing his expression? Maybe I wasn't thinking straight back then. No matter how many days passed, his words kept bothering me. He's not the kind of person who would joke about something like that, and that's what made it even more perplexing. I felt a strange mix of confusion and a desire to know the truth. Was there a way to find out more? I flipped through a few pages of my work files while pondering. Yes, maybe I could ask that person. One day, Yosef came home without looking at me and said this right away. Oh, I'm going on a business trip starting tomorrow.
What? Another trip? You were gone for about 3 days last week too, right?
Ignoring my surprise, he remained indifferent.
It can't be helped. Someone suddenly quit at this time of year, and we're short-staffed. Since I'm a reliable expert, I have to keep the workplace running.
Because he said it so suddenly, I couldn't help but ask.
Hey, do I know the person who quit? Was it that colleague you mentioned before?
Yosef used to tell me about things that happened at work and funny stories, so I knew some of the people he talked about frequently. I asked casually, but Yosef's expression hardened.
What? Does it matter?
Does it have anything to do with you, Ivy?
No, it doesn't. It's just a casual conversation.
Then Yosef, clearly annoyed, cut the conversation short and went to the bathroom. Recently, it feels like his business trips have been increasing. It's been 3 years since we got married, and there haven't been any notable changes like department transfers or promotions. He hasn't mentioned anything like that, not even once. But suddenly, his business trips became more frequent. Once a month turned into twice, then 3 times. Now, there are weeks when he's away twice, sometimes he's gone for the entire week. The next day, before going to work, Yosef said something to me.
This trip is for an important client, so don't even think about contacting me.
What, really? Telling me not to contact him no matter what seemed really serious.
Got it? If my phone rings and I get distracted during a crucial meeting, it'll be your fault. Do you think you can handle being responsible if we lose a $10 million contract?
He left, and I watched his back as he headed to work. I got ready to go to my own workplace. As usual, I put on a hoodie and jeans and rode my beloved bike. After working at my job and finishing my tasks, I took a break. There was a TV on in the break room, showing a report about a traffic accident. I was chatting with a coworker about the dangers of traffic accidents when my phone rang. I usually don't carry my phone with me at work, but I had it with me in the break room, so I noticed the call right away. The phone call was from an unknown number, and I answered it curiously, only to find it was from the police. They were informing me that Yosef had been in a car accident. He had seemed fine just a few days ago, and now he was in an accident. I couldn't believe it, but I pulled myself together to listen to what they had to say. Unfortunately, he had been seriously injured in the accident and was being taken to the hospital. They told me he hadn't regained consciousness yet and that I needed to come immediately. I quickly asked for the location of the accident and the name of the hospital where he was taken. But as I asked for the name, a question arose in my mind. The police station was in St. Helena, a well-known resort area. Does he go on business trips to such places too? That thought crossed my mind briefly. But anyway, I needed to get to him as soon as possible. We can talk about everything else later. I talked to my boss, left work early, and took some time off to rush to Yosef's side. However, before heading to Yosef, there was something I had to do first. I made a call to a certain place. Soon, they told me they would send the documents to my home. When I arrived at the hospital, he was lying in bed. It took him 5 days after the accident to finally regain consciousness. The doctor told me that he had collided head-on with a truck, suffering significant injuries, and as a result, he was paralyzed on one side of his body. No way. Yosef, it can't be true.
Sorry, but please take care of the 2 of us.
I couldn't help but wonder. Take care of the 2 of you? What on earth was he talking about? It didn't seem like a joke given the situation, so I asked.
Sorry, who do you mean by the 2 of you?
Yosef had a momentary look of realization, as if he had slipped up.
Who? Well, it's obvious, me and Riley.
Riley was Emily's daughter, my niece. I had only met her a few times at family gatherings, but why was she suddenly being mentioned here?
Why Riley's name all of a sudden? Well, she contacted me during my business trip and said that if anything happened to me, to take care of her.
Riley contacted Yosef specifically? And the first thing that came to my mind was,
why not ask Emily?
I blurted out without thinking.
Did Yosef and Riley exchange contact information? Not Riley, more like Emily, kind of.
Yosef and Emily had exchanged contact information? And now he was asking me to take care of them? And most importantly, Yosef's hesitant tone was really bothering me. With so many questions, I didn't know where to start when a nurse came in, wheeling a mobile bed. "This is the other passenger involved in the same accident," she said, bringing the bed over. The moment I saw who was on the bed, I screamed. Because the woman on that bed was unmistakably Emily. And she had a big belly. "Emily? Why are you here? And that belly, is it possible?" The nurse had said she was the other passenger in the accident. And those two people Yosef mentioned, could it be? "So, the car accident happened, and there's nothing we can do, so please take care of me and Emily."
Wow. You get it quickly. It's great to have a smart woman in situations like this.
I felt the blood drain from my head. This was too perfect to be a coincidence. It couldn't be just a coincidence. I was scared to ask, but I couldn't help it.
"So, Yosef, are you telling me that you went on a resort with Emily under the guise of a business trip, and then had a car accident during that trip?" "Well, the business trip was real. It's not a lie or anything. I just happened to see Emily and decided to give her a ride."
His stuttering and desperate excuses are pathetic. I can somehow tell that my voice is trembling. I can't fully grasp the situation I'm in right now.
"Oh, so you just happened to run into Emily on a business trip, and then conveniently decided to enjoy a trip together? Really?"
I couldn't help but continue speaking rapidly to Yosef. My feelings were a chaotic mix of not wanting to hear any more and knowing I couldn't ignore this. Whether he realized how I felt or not, Yosef responded in a carefree tone. He still didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. He was probably thinking about how to cover it up. His eyes were darting around frantically.
"No, you're overinterpreting. You always jump to the worst conclusions. It's one of your bad habits."
I saw this as my chance and confronted him with the truth.
"Yosef, this was a fake business trip, wasn't it? Just a cover for a romantic getaway with Emily." "I would never fake a business trip. I'm a well-respected and busy man. I don't have time for fake trips."
He still thought he could talk his way out of this, believing that shouting would erase the truth.
"So, you didn't fake the business trip? Do you think yelling at me will make the CEO believe you?"
Yosef prioritizes his job and his reputation above all else. He worked solely for the praise and recognition from his superiors. Just mentioning the CEO's name made him falter. When I said the CEO's name, he seemed momentarily scared.
"Huh? CEO? What does the CEO have to do with this? If you really didn't do anything wrong, you should be able to explain everything to the CEO."
"Well, if you can." Yosef sneered and responded.
"Ivy, you have no experience in corporate life. The CEO wouldn't get involved in a regular employee's business trip. It's embarrassing that you don't know that. Say whatever you want. By the way, I have a letter from the CEO for you."
As soon as he saw the envelope with the company logo, he suddenly seemed excited.
"This finally means my achievements are recognized. All these years working from the bottom up, enduring as a regular employee for over 15 years, it was worth it." "Oh, so you're getting a promotion?"
I couldn't help but ask, barely holding back laughter at Yosef's confident assumption.
"Of course. My peers have been getting promoted, and I've been waiting my turn for 10 long years. It's been tough, but hard work pays off. Give me the letter."
He genuinely seemed to think it was a promotion letter. "Here you go.
Take your time and read it."
I handed him the envelope, and he snatched it, slamming it down on the hospital table. He looked at it intently with a tense expression. He slowly tore open the envelope with the company logo. As he unfolded the paper, his previously excited demeanor froze.
"A dismissal notice. Termination for cause? Why me?
The envelope was indeed from the CEO of the company Yosef worked for. Look, there are more documents in the envelope. Maybe you'll understand if you read them.
Shut up. Damn it.
He angrily turned the envelope upside down, shaking out all the contents. The documents fell haphazardly onto the table, with a few scattering onto the floor. It's about the issues with the submitted receipts and the business trip routes. Do you recognize these documents?
No way! There's no way!
In fact, I had contacted the CEO of Yosef's company right after the accident and had them check everything, including the company mobile phone's GPS and the expense receipts. The CEO himself had been suspicious of Yosef's actions. I am grateful to the CEO for taking proactive steps because it was a call from an employee's wife. Thanks to the CEO's own involvement, we were able to gather solid evidence in an instant that Yosef couldn't overturn by himself. No matter how much he struggled, it was undeniable that Yosef had made a fictitious business trip and misused company expenses. It seems like the CEO has been keeping a close eye on Yosef as well. As expected, the CEO has been thoroughly watching you.
Shut up! Shut up!
It's already over. Your usual tricks and lies won't work anymore. How much did you know? How much? I already knew you were going to be fired. In fact, right after I asked them to start the investigation, the CEO had informed me that they were planning to fire him. However, considering Yosef's long service at the company, they also said they would accept his voluntary resignation. Being fired for cause. Hey, what am I supposed to do now? Oh, but Ivy, you're a childcare worker, so it's fine for you, right? Fine for me? What do you mean? I asked Yosef, who had a self-satisfied expression on his face. Because you have qualifications, you can work anywhere anytime. I do have a childcare qualification, but I'll be a stay-at-home dad and take care of Emily and Riley. Nowadays, you can ask for help from volunteers or helpers for childcare. And during that time, Ivy will work. Isn't that a great idea? I was disgusted by his terrible speech, delivered with flared nostrils. His unbelievably selfish statements made a mix of exasperation and anger well up inside me. Who would lend you a hand? You and the volunteers. I couldn't understand his belief that he could still rely on someone for help. Living while helping each other is essential, but it's clear that he only thought about getting help one-sidedly. It's not wrong to rely on someone, but living a life where you're constantly thinking about getting help from others is beyond me. I didn't go through the trouble of getting a childcare qualification to support a cheating, dishonest person. I'm not working to live with someone like that. I handed Yosef the business card of the lawyer I had already hired and told him, "We're getting a divorce. I'll be getting compensation from the divorce trial. For anything else, go through the lawyer."
Huh? Demanding compensation from a paralyzed person, are you a devil? Do you know what you're doing?
I sighed in exasperation and said, "Do you know what you're doing?" I should ask you the same question. If you think back on what you've done, maybe you'll understand.
You married me because you loved me, right? The vows in sickness and in health, was that a lie?
He grabbed the hem of my clothes with his functioning hand, but I forcefully shook it off. Then I finished telling Yosef everything and looked down at Emily in the bed next to him. Hey, Emily. You've always needed to be number one, haven't you? Even with me, your own sister. Emily's face momentarily showed a hint of fear, but she quickly returned to her usual expression. That's right. I can't stand that quiet Ivy got married successfully.
I was supposed to marry a rich man first. Marry a rich man?
I asked without thinking. That's right. The guy I dated right after high school was into gambling and never worked. Then I dated Riley's dad, who had a low salary, and we lived in an apartment forever. I can't take it anymore. Emily cried, but her words were completely selfish. You're always thinking about what others can do for you. I'm a woman. My job is to be beautiful, to be a shining jewel by my husband's side.
Well, Yosef may not be that good-looking, but he works for a well-known company, and I thought his salary might be good.
She said this while glaring at me.
It's because you didn't break up with him quickly that we had to hide and be together in secret, and that's why the accident happened.
Emily glanced back and forth between Yosef and me.
So, you're saying it's my fault? Isn't it? What else? You chose your partners yourself. And using someone's income as a reason to go after another woman's husband is just not right.
I felt my head starting to ache from talking to these two any longer, so I decided to cut it short. Besides, staying in the hospital room too long would be a nuisance. I was amazed at how easily these lines came out, like something from a drama. The sheer absurdity of her words left me speechless for a moment.
We'll discuss the rest through lawyers, Emily. For now, here's a lump sum for compensation. That's all I'll say. What? Compensation? For someone who's paralyzed? You sound just like Yosef.
It's laughable. It's unfortunate that you're paralyzed, but you were on a cheating trip, weren't you? It's your own fault. Emily reacted strongly to my words. You brought this on yourself. I muttered under my breath that it wasn't my fault, watching her face gradually turn pale, wondering how far she would go to avoid responsibility. In the end, Yosef and I got divorced. I had hired a lawyer who specialized in divorce cases, and we managed to get a higher settlement than usual from Yosef and Emily. I heard that after quitting his job, Yosef has been drifting from place to place. Emily, having tried to take her sister's husband, was disowned by her family and has been wandering with no place to go. She had found temporary support at a facility for people with disabilities, but all she did was complain, saying things like, "This isn't the kind of work I should be doing and I can't stand these tedious tasks." Not only was she unproductive, but she was also a nuisance to other users, leading to her being banned from the facility. Without access to welfare services or job placements, she has been surviving on the bare minimum disability insurance. As for Emily's child, Riley, I contacted Riley's dad, who gladly took him in. During the divorce, there was a custody battle, but Emily's fixed idea that a child should be with their mom and the mediator's decision resulted in her getting custody. I was a bit worried about Riley, so I was relieved when he was taken in by his dad. I felt that Riley could never truly be happy staying with Emily, so this was a comfort. I continue to work at the daycare, living my usual life. Regarding the settlement, Yosef's share was paid by his family, while Emily took out a loan to pay her part. Even though I received more money than I had expected, the happy days when I knew nothing are gone forever. With that, I can only move forward. No matter how much I look back, I can't return to those days, so I must move on. Maybe quitting my job and traveling to a foreign country I've never been to might be a good idea. With all these thoughts running through my mind, I spend my days.
Just because you both work doesn't mean you can leave your little child alone every day. I reported you.
After a long day of overtime, as I finally returned home, my neighbor suddenly barged in, yelling at me. I was shocked and scared. But wait, we don't have any children. What could be going on here? My name is Kelly, and I'm 29 years old. I live in an apartment with my husband, Andrew. We moved into this apartment right after we got married. The place is spacious, family-friendly, and conveniently located near a park and a grocery store. It felt very comfortable and ideal for us. The apartment next door had been vacant for a while, but about a month ago, a newlywed couple moved in. The wife appears to be pregnant. She is young, petite, and quite adorable. She came over to introduce herself after they moved in, and we exchanged a few words whenever we met during trash disposal. When I mentioned that I worked as a midwife at a general hospital, she expressed her wish to have given birth there. However, since her parents live far away, she plans to return to her hometown to utilize their support network. I work in the obstetrics department, and my husband, Andrew, is a clinical psychologist at the same hospital. We met at the hospital, got married, and it's been 5 years now, but we still don't have children. I know we should probably start thinking about having a child soon, given our age, but I love my job too much to take that step yet. Having a child would make it difficult to focus entirely on my work. I've seen firsthand how challenging it can be for someone with kids, like my colleague Lila. Lila is a single mother raising a 3-year-old boy. She gave birth without getting married, and the father hasn't acknowledged the child, so she receives no child support. Lila works tirelessly, putting her son in daycare, but she can't do overtime or night shifts, which makes her life quite tough. Even with just a day shift, she'd often have to leave early because the daycare would call if her son got sick. That day, she received such a call again. "Kelly, I'm sorry." Lila clasped her hands together, looking at me apologetically. Whenever Lila looked at me that way, it meant she had been summoned by the daycare center.
It's okay. I've got it covered. Jess, please go pick him up.
So, despite being scheduled for just a day shift, a series of deliveries kept me at the hospital late into the night. The apartment is usually peaceful at night, with only occasional sounds of children, providing a calm atmosphere. After another hectic day, I was in a hurry to get home and rest. As I reached home and opened the door, it happened.
Just because you both work doesn't mean you can leave your little child alone every day. I reported you.
As I was stepping into my apartment, a man suddenly burst in, shouting,
"Wait, what? Who are you?"
I tried to push the man, who had forced his way into my entrance, back outside and smelled alcohol. Was he drunk?
I'm Connor Calvin from next door.
Oh, Vivian's husband?
Yes, don't you know your own neighbors?
Well, we've never met before. While I had become acquainted with his wife, Vivian, I had never seen her husband, Calvin. What a terrible way to meet for the first time. I had no idea what he was talking about. Calvin then said,
"I've seen you leaving your child alone every day."
"What?"
"Every night, your kid is wandering around alone. You've been neglecting them, haven't you?"
"What?" Leaving such a small child out at night like that is clearly abuse. So, I reported it. Reported? If anyone should be reported, it's him. Suddenly bursting into my house yelling. He must be really drunk. "Stop neglecting your child because you are working."
Wait a minute. That's not true.
Huh?
We don't have any children here.
Huh? At that moment, Vivian peeked in.
What are you doing? It's the middle of the night at someone else's house. Kelly, I'm so sorry. Calvin comes home drunk almost every day.
Oh, really? He must be mistaken then. I could only force a smile. But Vivian said, "Kelly, are you sure there are no kids in your house? Are you hiding them?"
Huh?
Because I saw it too. Lately, almost every day, there's a little boy, about 3 years old, in front of your door.
What? That can't be true. We don't have any children here.
If you have kids, you should just say so. Did you not register the birth or something? Or did you kidnap him?
No way.
As I was getting flustered,
Kelly, what's going on?
I turned around to see Andrew coming up the stairs. Are you just getting back? No, I just went to the convenience store. Connor next door barged in yelling that we're neglecting our child.
What? Child? What is he talking about? But
Andrew paused for a moment, deep in thought. Come to think of it, I did see a child.
what?
I was shocked.
Stop playing dumb. It's your kid.
Calvin yelled again.
Anyway, it's late and you're disturbing the neighbors. Please leave.
Andrew grabbed my arm and pulled me inside, locking the door. From outside, Calvin was shouting and banging on the door, but eventually, it went quiet. Why do I have to be misunderstood like this? Exhausted, I collapsed on the spot. Child Protective Services visited the next afternoon. I happened to have the day off, and I was so tired from the previous day that I slept until noon. Just as I was heading to the kitchen to get something to eat, they knocked. It turned out Calvin had actually reported us. When I told them we didn't have any children, they left, but then the police came, which was surprising. They asked a lot of questions, but it seemed like they understood. I'm not sure if all the doubts were cleared, but I never expected to be questioned by the police over a non-existent child. With all that, it didn't feel like a restful day off at all. Time passed without me doing anything, and before I knew it, it was night. I can't let this be. I need to prepare dinner before Andrew gets home. I left the apartment and headed to the nearby supermarket. I ran into an acquaintance at the automatic doors of the supermarket.
Oh, Lila? And Jess?
Lila was there with a small boy. Kelly? Lila looked just as surprised. I hadn't met Jess before, but I had seen his photos and heard about him from Lila, so it didn't feel like the first time.
Does your house happen to be around here?
No, well, I had some errands nearby. It's late, so I thought I'd buy some chicken at the supermarket. Lila was unusually vague, probably too surprised. But what kind of errands could she have around here?
Really? I live in the apartment just over there. You should drop by sometime.
Is that so? Well, I need to get this kid home and put him to bed. See you. Lila quickly went inside, and after that, we didn't cross paths again in the supermarket. While preparing dinner, I kept an eye on what was happening outside. Occasionally, I opened the door to peek outside, but I didn't see any sign of the boy Calvin had mentioned.
Maybe it was just a baseless accusation.
Just as I was about to close the door, Calvin, coming from next door, passed in front of our door.
Oh, good evening.
I felt awkward, but I decided to greet him anyway. However, it seemed Calvin had no intention of reciprocating.
Weren't you arrested? Huh? The police came, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Child Protective Services, too. After I explained that we don't have any children, they seemed to understand.
What? You're still lying, you criminal. What? How can you say that? A little boy has been wandering around here every night. But I've never seen him. I was off today, but I didn't see anything. Of course, since you are the culprit, you can say whatever you want. No, I mean, there's no culprit.
Calvin didn't seem drunk today, yet he was making the same accusations.
Both Vivian and your husband saw the child. Why are you the only one who hasn't?
I don't know.
I get it. Kelly's secret child, right?
What?
That's ridiculous. Please, just stop.
I couldn't make sense of any of it. Now that I think about it, Vivian did see the child.
I'll ask Vivian about the child next time. Since she's home the most, she might know something. I don't have any acquaintances with small children.
I was about to say when I remembered Lila and Jess from earlier. A boy around 3 years old. He seemed just about Jess's age. But it couldn't be Jess.
Vivian isn't here,
Calvin said.
What? Someone like you, abusing children, isn't good for a pregnant woman's mental state. She went back to her parents' house early. She'll be there until the baby is born. What? She's already gone?
I felt bad knowing I wouldn't see her for a while, with all the misunderstandings. It left me with an unpleasant feeling.
Go to the police and turn yourself in.
No, really, I haven't done anything wrong. Strangely, the boy didn't appear again after that. Andrew hadn't seen him either. However, Calvin's harassment escalated. Letters with insults were put in the mailbox. They were slipped through the gap in the front door. But that wasn't all. Loud music blared from the next room. The walls were pounded on. Garbage and dead insects were left outside our door. This continued, and I seemed to break down mentally, unable to sleep at night or eat. I couldn't muster the energy for anything, not even housework. My mental state was unstable, my health deteriorating, and I began to miss work often. Seeing me like this, Andrew suggested we move. I felt reluctant to flee, and I didn't want to leave with Vivian still misunderstanding, but I couldn't bear the thought of this continuing. We decided to move. While searching for apartments on my smartphone, a call came in. The screen showed Lila. Honestly, I didn't feel like talking to anyone, but I answered to apologize for the trouble at work. Layla was very concerned. So, I explained the situation. There was a small boy left alone at night, and the neighbors thought he might be my child. They suspected I was abusing him too. The neighbor's husband is so obsessed, he just doesn't understand at all. Not only that, but he's started harassing me, and it's been escalating. It's scary, and I feel sick. So, we decided to move. We can't live here safely anymore.
That neighbor, could it be someone named Calvin?
What? Yes, but how do you know? Then Lila said something completely unexpected.
It's my fault. Kelly, I'm so sorry.
What?
That child, it's probably Jess.
What?
I'm the one who left the child alone. I'm so sorry for making you feel bad, Kelly.
Wait a minute, Lila. What do you mean?
I didn't understand at all. Why would Lila's child be wandering around our place? Could it be related to when we met at the supermarket?
Could it be that Calvin knows you work at the general hospital?
I mentioned it to his wife.
I knew it.
What do you mean?
I'll explain properly. Can I come over now?
What? Now?
I'm sorry to bother you when you're not feeling well. It's okay if it's too much.
No, it's fine. I wanted to hear Lila's story and clear up the misunderstanding quickly.
Then I'll pick up Jess from the childcare center and come over.
With that, Lila hurriedly hung up the phone. After a while, Layla arrived with Jess. Jess looked up at me and greeted me with a slightly unclear, "Hello." "Hello, Jess." Then I turned to Lila. "Lila, how did you know our place?" "I thought it might be a problem since I hung up before giving you the address."
"What?" "Oh, well, there's only this apartment complex near the supermarket. Anne."
For some reason, Lila didn't finish her sentence.
Anyway, come on in. I'll get you something to drink. Is orange juice okay for Jess?
"Yeah," Jess answered happily. Then, as I listened to Lila's story, I was astonished. At first, I couldn't believe it, but if it were true, Calvin's actions made sense. It turns out, everything was caused by the neighbor, Calvin. While I was at a loss for words, Jess, who had been watching TV, got bored and stood up. "I'm going outside." With that, he ran towards the door.
Wait, Jess.
By the time I caught up, Jess had already opened the door. And then,
I found you.
Standing outside was Calvin. Jess stepped back, scared by Calvin's loud voice. I pushed Jess back into the room and stepped outside.
I knew it. I just saw him come out of your house.
Calvin laughed triumphantly.
Of course. He's a guest at our house. Don't try to fool me. He's your kid, admit it already. He's not my child. He's my colleague's child. And he's yours. What?
Calvin's smile froze, his face going rigid.
He's the child of you and Lila. What?
I approached Calvin.
Don't pretend you've forgotten. Calvin, you were seeing Lila.
I could see Calvin turning pale.
I don't know anyone by that name. Lila was so happy when she told me her boyfriend proposed to her. But you cheated on her with a younger girl and broke off the engagement unilaterally. Lila was pregnant with your baby. You disappeared from her life and married that young girl instead. That girl is Vivian, right?
I told you, I don't know her.
Don't play dumb. Do you know how much Lila struggled because you wouldn't acknowledge the baby?
What are you talking about?
Calvin, you told me to confess and turn myself in, but now you're dodging the truth when it's inconvenient for you. I'm shocked.
No, that's not.
Lila had a tough life. She worked as a midwife and also had a night job cleaning a supermarket. She had nowhere to leave Jess at night, so she took her to work. One day, she saw you shopping at the supermarket and found out you lived nearby.
No, that's not true.
It is. Lila told me everything. She wanted to talk to you, Calvin, to introduce you to his child. She followed you and saw you entering this apartment. But then she saw Vivian come out and realized you were married and that Vivian was pregnant, so she couldn't confront you.
That can't be.
I mentioned to Vivian that I worked as a midwife at the General Hospital. Calvin, didn't Vivian tell you? You knew Lila and I worked together, didn't you? That's why you harassed me. But you never guessed that the child you occasionally saw was your own. You tried to get me out of the apartment by accusing me.
Wait, do you have proof that the child is mine?
If you want to prove the child isn't yours, you can cooperate with a DNA test, can't you?
No, that's not necessary.
If the child isn't yours, you should be able to do it.
No, I mean,
At that moment, Lila appeared behind me. As Kelly explained. Calvin's eyes widened. Calvin, it's been a while.
Lila.
Calvin was clearly flustered.
Why are you doing this? Do you want to ruin my family?
If I wanted to ruin your family, I would have confronted you the first time I saw you with your wife. I don't care about you, Calvin. I just couldn't bear the thought of your wife going through what I did.
Then why did you let the child come to me?
Jess waits in the break room while I work my night job, but sometimes he slips out. He remembered coming to this apartment before. Maybe he sensed something. He came here alone, and you saw him.
Calvin sank to the floor, as if his strength had left him.
I'm sorry.
Do you think sorry is enough?
Then Calvin sincerely apologized.
Please, don't tell Vivian about this.
I exchanged glances with Lila. Lila sighed, looking quite exasperated. I looked at Calvin, who was apologizing.
Is it because you don't want to ruin your relationship with Vivian and the baby?
Yes, please. I'm begging you.
That's something Vivian should decide. She needs to know what kind of person you are. If she decides to forgive you, then you can continue as a family.
Leaving Calvin behind, we went back inside. Sorry, Kelly. Thank you. Lila, overwhelmed by her frustration, started crying like a child. Mom, are you okay? Jess, comforting Lila, looked incredibly reliable. It seemed Vivian did not forgive him, and I heard Calvin got divorced. Calvin moved into a cheap studio apartment alone. He's working hard to pay child support for 2 kids. Lila no longer needs to work at the supermarket, allowing her to spend more time with Jess. With more financial and emotional stability, they even managed to go on their first trip together. They brought back souvenirs and seemed really happy. As for me, I found out I was pregnant. Being a midwife, I thought it would be easy, but I realized how anxious I felt about carrying a child. I suffered from morning sickness that seemed endless. Pregnancy is tough. Luckily, my husband Andrew is very understanding. He listens when I'm emotionally unstable and helps with household chores when I'm physically exhausted. But I can't imagine how lonely Lila must have felt, betrayed by her boyfriend and facing childbirth alone. Now, I'm preparing for childbirth with Lila's guidance.
Don't worry, Kelly. I'll deliver your baby,
Layla said enthusiastically.
Your husband is in critical condition. Please come to the scene immediately.
What?
A man identifying himself as a police officer blurted out unexpected words, startling me. I wondered who could be calling on a Sunday morning, and when I picked up, this is what I heard. I felt as if I were having a bad dream.
What do you mean by that?
I asked, my mind reeling, trying to understand what had happened to my husband, Brandon.
You will understand if you come. Just come to the Sunset Harbor Apartments right now.
The police hurriedly provided the location, which seemed to be an apartment complex. I jotted down the address, not comprehending anything. The call ended there, and I couldn't ask half of what I wanted to know. What should I do? I was scared to go alone. Thinking this, I decided to call nearby relatives and head to the scene together. My name is Melissa. I am 35 years old and a primary school teacher. Currently, I live with my husband Brandon, and we live close to both my parents' home and my in-laws' house. We were classmates in middle school. So, both our parents are nearby. Brandon and I reconnected 5 years ago at our middle school reunion. It had been 15 years since graduation, and the reunion itself was our first in 10 years. The hotel buffet where the event was held was attended by less than half our grade, which surprised me as I expected fewer people. In our 30s, we talked enthusiastically about work, marriage, and children. It struck me that many people were already married, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable. At that time, I was engrossed in my work, without a boyfriend who might become a marriage partner, feeling lonely.
Hey, is that you, Melissa?
Just as I was getting tired of listening to my friends' happy family stories, someone tapped my shoulder and spoke to me. It was Brandon, who is now my husband.
Yeah.
Brandon, it's been a while. Brandon had been the student council president in middle school, and I was the secretary. So, I should have had more interaction with him than with other boys, but our relationship ended when we went to different high schools after graduation. Long time no see. Would you like to have a drink over there? Brandon, who always seemed smart, still talked the same way and didn't hesitate to invite me out. Sure. I left my friends, overwhelmed by Brandon's momentum, but felt relieved inside. I had been tired of listening to their happy episodes. When it was just the two of us, Brandon talked fluently about our middle school memories and how he was training at another restaurant to take over his parents' restaurant. Following his lead, I shared my experiences as a primary school teacher. Brandon listened intently, and I felt fulfilled for the first time in a while. Thanks for today. Let's meet again.
Thank you too. Yes, I'd love to meet again.
I nodded to his invitation with surprising ease. The reunion, which I thought would be uneventful, led me to reconnect with a former classmate, Brandon. After that, we went on several dates, having meals and watching movies together. I worked at a local primary school, and Brandon worked at a restaurant near his parents' home, so meeting was never an issue. It was more surprising to me that a classmate lived so close by. After dating him for a while, he confessed his feelings to me, and we became a couple. Even after we started dating, our frequency of meeting didn't change. However, since Brandon works in the service industry, he can't always get weekends off, which sometimes made me a bit dissatisfied. But I thought, as an adult relationship, this much should be tolerated.
Melissa, I'm sorry for making you wait. Let's get married.
Brandon proposed to me on my 32nd birthday, 2 years after we started dating. Yes, of course. Thank you. I thought if I were to marry, it had to be Brandon, so I accepted his proposal. That night, we fell asleep feeling extremely happy. When it came to marrying him, I first went to greet my parents. My parents are always gentle and basically accept anyone. So when he came to our house as my fiancé,
if it's someone as kind as Brandon, we're all for it.
They responded happily. Brandon was so relieved by their positive reaction that he drank a lot that night. Next, it was my turn to meet Brandon's parents. I heard they run a restaurant, so I was very nervous. At Brandon's family's restaurant, they reserved a private room for us that day. When we were shown to the room, I couldn't help but let out a sigh of admiration.
Brandon is going to take over this restaurant. Are you okay with that?
Brandon's mom, Emma, asked me, elegantly placing her hand on her cheek. Yes. I have heard about the family business many times. I understand that eventually, he will take over, and I would like to help him. I replied nervously with formal words. Then we are reassured. Brandon and Melissa, do your best. Brandon's dad, Eric, who seemed intimidating at first, turned out to be kind, which made me feel relieved.
Wasn't it nerve-wracking?
That night, Brandon asked me softly while kissing me.
Yes. But your parents seem kind.
Do they? They're always strict with me. They were just hiding their true selves today, Brandon said, shrugging and making it sound like a joke. With Brandon's parents' approval, I thought it might be nice to work together at the restaurant when Brandon takes over. With both sets of parents' approval, our married life began. At first, our marriage went smoothly without any major problems. Since we both worked, we split the housework equally, and if we had a day off together, we would go out. He was always busy, but he never forgot to care for me.
Thanks for working hard every day.
Saying. I felt very fortunate to be married to him. However, as our marriage continued, I began to notice a change in his attitude. The catalyst seemed to be when I was told at the hospital that I had difficulty conceiving. We couldn't have children, so we decided to get tested at the hospital. The result was that Brandon had no issues, but I did.
It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped.
Brandon, I'm sorry.
Melissa, it's not your fault. This is something decided by God.
He gently comforted me, rubbing my back as I was feeling down. However, contrary to his words, it seemed that Brandon was feeling a sense of disappointment towards me. After that, once it became clear that I couldn't have children, he stopped seeking me out altogether. In fact, I felt that his attitude had become distant. The chores that we used to share equally were. I've been really busy lately.
Dad and Mom are always telling me to spend my days off training at the family business. They keep reminding me that I'm the only successor, and I need to grow enough to be able to entrust others with the business.
With these words, he stopped helping with any of the household chores. The phrase, "You don't have a successor," didn't seem like something Emma and Eric would say. Emma and Eric, despite their stern appearance, had always treated me kindly.
Thank you for marrying Brandon.
Always grateful for that. So, Brandon's words seemed like a bitter jab directed at me because I couldn't have children.
I understand. But when things settle down, could you help out a little? I'm struggling to manage both work and the household chores. My body is really feeling the strain.
This was the truth. Even though it's an elementary school, teaching involves a lot of work and navigating complex human relationships. When I got home, I was still faced with a mountain of chores, and I was becoming increasingly exhausted.
Sure, once things calm down.
He said this to placate me, but he never once helped with the chores afterward. From that point on, his behavior grew stranger by the day. Not only did he refuse to help with the chores, but he also started criticizing my cooking and ironing.
This soup is too spicy. You need to make it milder so the flavors of the ingredients come through. The wrinkles in my shirt aren't out. Are you slacking off?
Hey, I found hair on the bedroom floor. Can't you at least keep it clean? It seemed like he wanted to find fault with everything I did around the house. He was especially critical of my cooking. Growing up with gourmet food had made him very particular about taste. His detailed critiques of my ironing and cleaning felt like an attack on my very existence.
If you're going to be that picky, why don't you do everything yourself?
He retorted angrily.
What? I keep telling you I'm exhausted from work every day. Plus, Dad and Mom are always putting pressure on me. It's just too much.
He angrily raked his fingers through his hair and, clearly stressed out, hurled the TV remote onto the floor.
What are you doing?
I was genuinely shocked. He had never acted out physically like this before, even though he often complained verbally. I began to doubt my choices, wondering if this was his true nature coming to light.
It's all your fault that I'm like this. Because you can't have children, Dad and Mom are constantly pressuring me.
Brandon hurled heartless words at me with an irritated expression. This left me more shocked than angry, and I ended up bedridden for several days. While I was in bed, even on his days off from work at the restaurant.
I have to train at the family restaurant,
he said, and he was gone all day. Brandon would never have neglected me when I was sick before. His sudden change left me with nothing but tears. One time, he surprised me by coming home in the morning.
I was training until late at night and I'm exhausted,
he said, collapsing into bed as soon as he got home. I couldn't help but notice the faint scent of shampoo.
Was it really training last night?
I asked, unable to hide my curiosity.
What? Are you doubting me?
He glared at me, making me shake my head instinctively. No matter how I looked at it, his recent late returns were strange. But as the expected heir to the family restaurant, I had no choice but to accept his nightly training excuse. I spent my days at work and doing household chores, mulling over my suspicions. Then one day, while I was grocery shopping after work, I ran into Emma at the supermarket.
Oh, Melissa.
What a coincidence to see you here.
Hello.
Emma smiled brightly at me. Then, as if remembering something, she clapped her hands. Melissa, I've been having trouble because he hasn't been coming over lately. Is he busy?
I've asked him several times to come when he has time because I have things to teach him,
Emma said, looking troubled. I was surprised by her words.
What? He leaves home every time his work is off, saying he's going to train at the family restaurant. He comes back late at night or even in the morning, always saying how tough the training was.
Emma tilted her head at my words. I realized that our conversation wasn't adding up. What do you mean by that? Emma's gentle eyes flashed sharply. I might have stumbled upon something significant.
I don't really understand it myself. He isn't going to the restaurant? That means he's been lying to me and staying out late.
A chill ran down my spine. Brandon often complained about being pressured by Emma and Eric over the air issue, blaming me for it. Indeed, as someone unable to have children, I felt guilty towards Brandon, and his complaints always made me sad. But if what Emma said was true, he had been going out behind my back. There would be no need to lie about training if it were something innocent. Emma, does this mean? I watched Emma's expression. She raised her eyebrows sharply.
Yes. It's unacceptable.
We exchanged glances and nodded firmly. Emma was likely thinking the same thing as I was. Brandon was hiding something serious from us all. That meant,
I'll keep an eye on him from now on.
Got it. I'll report to you if I notice anything suspicious. With our opinions aligned, we parted ways. Now, what should I do about him? Thoughts swirled in my head. I had started to think that I needed to gather evidence somehow to find out the truth about Brandon. Should I hire a private investigator, or should I try to find out on my own what Brandon is doing on his days off? 2 weeks had passed while I was thinking about various things. During that time, Brandon kept saying, "I'm going to my parents' home," on his days off, and he often came back late at night. Each time, I contacted Emma to confirm that Brandon wasn't going to the in-laws' house. When I finally thought it was really suspicious and decided to hire a private investigator, I received a phone call. It was a Sunday morning, and Brandon had been away since the previous day, saying he had to stay overnight for training at work. I picked up my mobile phone and looked at the screen, but it was from an unknown number, and I hesitated for a moment. Wondering if Emma had changed her phone number or if it was Eric, whose number I hadn't registered yet, I pressed the call button on my mobile phone. "Hello." I answered the phone cautiously, listening for any clues. I heard someone taking a breath on the other end of the line. "This is the police." The word police. "What?" made me exclaim. What on earth could the police want with me? Feeling suspicious. "Yes, this is she," I replied. The next moment, they said,
"Your husband is in critical condition. Please come to the scene immediately." What?
I was stunned by the unexpected words from the man who claimed to be a police officer. I wondered who on earth would call me on a Sunday morning and got this kind of news. I felt like I was in a bad dream.
"What do you mean by that?"
I asked, my mind racing with thoughts about what could have happened to Brandon.
"You'll understand when you get here. Just come to Sunset Harbor Apartments as soon as possible."
The police officer quickly gave me the address, which seemed to be an apartment complex. I wrote down the address, still confused. The call ended abruptly, and I couldn't ask half of what I wanted to know. What should I do? I was anxious about going alone. I decided to call some relatives who lived nearby. Fortunately, both Brandon and I were from the same area, so my parents and Emma and Eric responded immediately. Emma even called Brandon's Uncle Robert and Aunt Charlotte. With this many people, we should be able to handle whatever happens. Feeling reassured, we all headed to the scene together.
"Do you think he is okay?"
"I don't know, but we have to go." My mom and the in-laws, who had joined us, all seemed upset. Hearing that his life was in danger, especially Emma and Eric, were visibly agitated. Even though Brandon had been acting strangely lately, I didn't want him to lose his life. Praying for Brandon's safety, we arrived at the address given by the police. It was a typical apartment complex with a security lock at the entrance. I rang the intercom for 312C. Despite it being a police matter, there weren't any police cars outside the apartment, which I found odd. However, the relatives seemed too focused on finding out about Brandon to think about it. "Please come in quickly." The police officer who answered the intercom sounded somewhat hurried. When the security door opened, we rushed to 312C. "Excuse me." The door to 312C was firmly closed. Normally, in such situations, the police would have the door open and secured, which made me concerned. By this point, everyone except me started to think something was wrong. I nervously reached for the front door. It was unlocked and opened easily. Walking down the short hallway, Emma was the first to open the door to the living room.
"This is unbelievable!"
Emma's scream echoed. I imagined seeing Brandon in a horrible state and peeked into the living room from behind her. "What?" I couldn't believe my eyes at the unexpected sight. There, sitting naked, was Brandon, and next to him was a young woman. The woman was wrapped in just a towel, and I couldn't help but doubt my own eyes. And standing beside them was the man who had called me. Dressed in a suit, he looked like an ordinary office worker, not a police officer. The man turned to us and spoke. "I'm sorry for lying about being the police. I'm Nicholas, the husband of the woman sitting here, Amanda. This is our home.
Lies, wife. Husband.
Emma mumbled, looking confused. Meanwhile, Brandon and the woman, Amanda, were blushing furiously.
Can you tell us what happened?
I realized I had been tricked by Nicholas, who had pretended to be the police. However, seeing that Nicholas meant no harm to us, I decided to calmly listen to the facts. Actually, Nicholas began to explain the situation. Recently, Amanda's behavior seemed strange. She would come home very late, even though she only had a part-time job. When I asked for reasons, she would make the same excuses, like saying a night shift worker suddenly called in sick. At first, I just brushed it off, thinking it was normal. But then she started being out even on her days off. And lately, she's only been working her part-time job about twice a week. She used to work 5 days a week. When she told me she cut back because she was tired, I started getting suspicious.
It was really tough on me.
Amanda desperately tried to make excuses, but in this situation, her words sounded hollow. Nicholas continued. Naturally, I began to suspect she was cheating. I'd ask her things like, "Who did you drink with tonight?" or "How are you connected to your friend's boyfriend?" I was trying to catch her off guard, hoping she'd slip up and reveal something. But she never did. She was careful. So, I changed my strategy. I lied about going on a business trip and set up hidden cameras in the house.
Isn't recording without consent illegal?
Brandon shouted. I glared at him. Who are you to talk? You have nothing to defend yourself with. Seeing his face twist in frustration, Nicholas resumed his story. Last night, I stayed at a nearby motel. I watched the house through the cameras the whole time. The footage streamed live to my mobile phone. And as you can see, this man came over, and in no time, he and Amanda, well, you get it. I wanted to burst in and catch them in the act, but when I saw them fall asleep naked, I thought I'd wait and make a bigger scene by inviting the man's family over. This morning, while they were still asleep, I came home and caught them. Melissa's contact information was given by this man after a bit of persuasion. Sorry for being so mean. Nicholas spoke calmly, but his actions revealed a desire for revenge. Setting up hidden cameras in his home and summoning me, Brandon's wife, to expose his wife's infidelity showed his determination to retaliate for the humiliation he had endured. After Nicholas finished speaking, Amanda, with tears in her eyes, said,
"You're the worst."
But Nicholas's expression remained unchanged. You think I'm the worst? Are you insane? It was as if he was silently challenging her. Perhaps for the young Amanda, Nicholas, being significantly older, was not satisfying. Although Brandon was around the same age, he had a youthful appearance, making it understandable why Amanda might choose him as a lover. I, his wife, analyzed this situation calmly, feeling a bit disgusted with myself.
Damn it! You all are ganging up on us. It's not fair. Besides, isn't it you and that guy's fault for not satisfying their partners?
Faced with undeniable evidence of his infidelity, Brandon could only lash out at us. Even though he was being stared down by everyone, I had to acknowledge his defiant spirit. However, I couldn't bring myself to forgive Brandon. I stepped forward. There were so many things I wanted to say to Brandon. Who's really being unfair here? You knew I couldn't have children, and yet you blamed me, saying Emma and Eric pressured you to find an heir, and that you needed to make sure you was ready to take over. Wasn't that all a lie?
What?
Pressure?
We never said anything like that. Did we, Eric?
I only wanted to teach you about the job. I never mentioned anything about an heir. Emma and Eric looked puzzled.
They don't seem like the type to put that kind of pressure on you.
Exactly. Even Charlotte and Robert shook their heads. Brandon looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Look.
As you can see, neither Emma nor Eric have put any pressure on you. And yet you blamed me and criticized all my cooking and cleaning. I kept wondering why you had to say such things to me. But now I understand. You were verbally abusing me, trying to push me to be the one to bring up divorce, weren't you?
That's... Brandon's face turned pale and twisted. It seemed I was right. I was utterly astonished. How could he tell such a lie that would be discovered so quickly? I couldn't comprehend it. The thought that he had been infatuated with a younger woman made me feel sick. I hated my past self for being so thrilled about marrying him. I had thought that with him, our conversations would be lively, and we'd have a fun married life. Feeling betrayed, I nodded at Nicholas, who was experiencing the same humiliation.
Amanda, I'm divorcing you. And you can bet I'll be asking for alimony in court.
Nicholas said this clearly to Amanda.
Wait a minute, why alimony? I was played by this man. He forced his way into my house and pinned me down in bed.
In a final act of desperation, Amanda turned on Brandon, who was slumped beside her. He looked at Amanda, shocked.
Hey, what are you saying? Why am I the only one being blamed? You knew I was married when you approached me at the store. That's a bigger crime. What?
Brandon and Amanda started arguing, both still naked. The low-level blame game left everyone speechless. The hidden camera footage would clearly show that Brandon hadn't forced Amanda into anything. Nicholas and I finally reached our breaking point with their pitiful bickering.
Both of you, who are you arguing with? You're both married, and you cheated. That is the truth. I'm divorcing too. Exactly. Stop fighting each other and apologize to us. Then, get out of this house.
Brandon and Amanda's shoulders shook. Riding on our anger, even Emma and Eric began to criticize Brandon.
Brandon, you're no longer fit to take over our family business. Apologize to Melissa right now.
I don't care about you anymore. You can pay for your alimony yourself, got it?
As relatives, we're ashamed. We won't be lending you any money either.
No way. Brandon looked at Emma, Eric, and me with pleading eyes, as if he had planned to ask them for help with the alimony.
Until you pay what you owe, I'll keep coming back. Be prepared for that,
I said in a calm voice, and finally, Brandon stood up, put on the clothes he had left scattered in the bedroom, and left Nicholas's house. Amanda, left behind, looked at Nicholas and said, I'm sorry. But Nicholas saw it as mere crocodile tears and threw her clothes at her, tossing her out of the house. Left behind, we all exchanged glances, trying to grasp what had just happened and sighed deeply. Melissa, I am deeply sorry for our foolish son. Emma and Eric apologized sincerely. How could such respectable parents produce a son like Brandon?
It was all his doing. Emma and Eric, you're not to blame.
Even as I said this, Emma and Eric continued to apologize profusely. I divorced Brandon in less than 3 days after that. It turned out Brandon started his affair with Amanda when he found out I couldn't have children. I felt sorry for Brandon in that regard, but that didn't excuse his cheating. I remembered the hurtful words he had thrown at me and demanded a substantial settlement and compensation in the divorce court. Currently, Brandon doesn't have the means to pay the requested amount in full and ended up in debt. If he had taken over the family restaurant, he could have repaid it quickly, but Emma and Eric decided against letting him take over. Apparently, they were fed up with him for cheating and hurting me. Without inheriting the restaurant, Brandon no longer needed to work at the restaurant where he had been training. Despite this, he should have continued working to support himself, but it turned out Brandon had been skipping work to see Amanda. The restaurant owner was furious and fired him. Having lost both his assets and his job, Brandon is now looking for a new job. Brandon, who had thought he would make a living as a chef from a young age until recently, now found himself aimless and in a state of despair. In his mid-30s, he had no interest in a corporate job and managed to get by with part-time work at a diner. However, part-time work alone wasn't nearly enough to pay off his debts. I assumed he was looking for a full-time job while working part-time, but apparently, Brandon had taken up gambling, hoping for a quick turnaround. I thought to myself that he would probably be in debt for the rest of his life. I hope you fall into a self-deprecating lifestyle and suffer from debt hell. I imagined his downfall from a distance, feeling detached. Meanwhile, I decided to start to find a new man again. I had initially thought I would stay single for a while, but Emma and Eric encouraged me to find a better man. At the dating agency, I made sure to note in my profile that I was unable to have children. Recently, a man reached out to me, saying he didn't mind not having children and just wanted to get to know me better. He seemed very sincere and calm. I felt a glimmer of hope, thinking that maybe I could start over with him. My name is Sarah. My husband died suddenly soon after our 2 daughters were born. My parents had already passed away, so I relied on my father's brother and his wife, who lived nearby, to help me raise my children in the house my husband left us. Uncle Bob and his wife had no children, and they treated me like their own daughter since I was young. I started working as a secretary at Bob's company. When I got married, I was a stay-at-home mom. I enjoyed making clothes for my daughters with a faint hope that someday my hobby of sewing would bring in some income. But when my husband passed away, I couldn't afford to stay at home anymore. Bob offered me a job, understanding that I needed a steady income to raise 2 children. Bob's company, though not large, was dedicated to making high-quality products with pride. That's where I met Mike. He was also a mid-career hire. He had a previous marriage that ended in divorce, and he had to leave his last job because he had married his ex-wife there. Even so, he was earnest and hardworking, with a gentle personality, gradually becoming someone the team relied on. Eventually, we started dating and promised to get married. Mike was good with the kids, and they grew attached to him. I thought it would be good for my young daughters to have a father figure again. However, it had been less than 3 years since my previous husband's death, so I had some doubts. I consulted Bob and proceeded with his guidance, asking my uncle and his wife to witness our marriage. Since we were both remarrying, we decided not to have a wedding ceremony. We planned to just register our marriage when things settled down. Mike moved into the house my previous husband left, and our new life began. I was concerned that living in the house I shared with my late husband might be uncomfortable for Mike, so I said, "We can sell this house and rent an apartment if you prefer." But he replied,
"There's no need. The kids are used to this place."
At the time, I thought he said that for our sake, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Mike was an only child raised by a single mother. He had lived with his mother since he was a child. Perhaps because of that, he was extremely devoted to her. Whenever something happened, he worried about his mother living alone. At first, I thought he was a kind person, but over time, I began to feel it was excessive. It was almost like he worshipped her. I hoped nothing would go wrong, but my fears became reality. "Sarah, I've decided that my mom will live with us," Mike said suddenly one night after putting the kids to bed.
What?
"It's fine, right? We have extra rooms."
That's not the point.
Then what is the point?
Well, it's just too sudden. You should have discussed it with me first.
Why? If Mom wants to move in, we should agree.
What?
Are you against her moving in, Sarah?
It's not about being against it. I just need time to think.
What's there to think about? Are you saying we should leave Mom to grow old alone? I thought you were kinder than that.
That's not fair.
I had vaguely considered that someday we might live with Mike's mother, Mary. But I'd only met her once during a family meeting. I didn't really know her. Mike had told me countless good things about Mary, but that was his view as her son. To me, she was a stranger. Suddenly living together without understanding each other's personalities seemed too reckless. And Mary wanting to move into a house with a DIL and kids she hardly knew felt pushy. But I couldn't say that to Mike, who put his mother first. Unable to give a clear answer, I remained vague. But they weren't people who understood my feelings. On the next holiday, Mary arrived with her belongings.
Sarah, nice to meet you. Let's get along well. And Emma, Betty, be good to Grandma.
Yes.
It's such a blessing to live in such a big house. It's all thanks to Mike marrying you, Sarah. I'm so proud of my son.
This house was built by my late husband for our family, yet she was so optimistic. Crediting her son. But she had already given up her apartment, and I couldn't just throw her out. So, we gave her an empty room, and our life together began. For the kids, having someone they met only once suddenly move in and ask to be called Grandma was confusing. My children clung to me and kept their distance from Mary. Yet she complained to me, saying, "They're not cute kids.
They're not Mike's children, so I guess it's to be expected." Sarah, what kind of upbringing are you giving them?
Mary didn't help with the children's daycare pickup or drop-off, didn't feed them, and didn't bathe them. Even with her living with us, I had to handle everything myself. It didn't stop there. She didn't do any housework at all. Laundry, meal preparation, and cleanup, all these tasks increased because there was one more adult. She wasn't working, just watched TV and relaxed at home. Occasionally, she went out and bought whatever she wanted. If she had that much money, I wished she would help with the household expenses, but she didn't offer a single cent. I would have liked to set some ground rules before living together, but now it was too late. If I tried to say anything to Mary, she would respond tenfold. It seemed like she disapproved of everything I did. The house wasn't clean enough, the laundry wasn't folded properly, meals were served too late, the food was too bland, my attitude towards Mike was poor, the list went on and on. Even though I was doing my best to juggle work, childcare, and housework. Mike, who used to help with the children, now spent all his time with Mary when he was home.
Mike, Mary is still healthy. Could she help a bit? Even just taking care of the children would be a huge help. It would also help them bond with Mary.
What are you talking about? Mom raised me on her own and worked hard all her life. I want to let her relax a little.
Then can you help a bit more?
I'm working hard on site all year round, in the heat. I have overtime every day. You, on the other hand, work in an air-conditioned office and get off work on time.
That's true, but
I work full-time, then come home to housework and childcare, with no time for myself. Even if I think I'll have time after the kids go to bed, I'm so exhausted that I fall asleep with them, and before I know it, it's morning. This has been my life continuously. Is it wrong to ask for help from my husband or MIL? There was one more thing I wanted to mention to Mary. Since she moved in, the utility bills had skyrocketed. Electricity, water, gas, everything was being wasted. I was trying to save as much as possible, reducing waste, but it was futile. If I turned off the air conditioner, lights, or TV in her room while she was out,
I wanted to come back to a comfortable room. Why did you turn it off?
she would complain. She didn't bathe just once a day. Even a short outing led to a shower and blow-dryer usage. The shampoo and body soap were depleting rapidly.
Could you ask Mary to help save a bit more?
I asked Mike.
She grew up poor in a single-parent household. Let her do as she pleases,
was his only response. Reluctantly, I decided to ask Mary myself.
Mary, I've been telling Emma and Betty not to waste electricity and water. I'd appreciate it if you could cooperate too.
Mary stared at me and replied with a sarcastic tone.
So, you make the kids live a constrained life too.
But then she added,
All right, I get it. We're living on Mike's income, so I'll put up with it for Mike's sake.
It seemed like she understood, but Mary only pretended to understand. In reality, she had other plans. One night, after putting the children to bed, I fell asleep as usual. I was woken up by Mike.
Sarah, what did you say to Mom? Huh?
Still groggy, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Mike was glaring at me with an angry expression.
Sarah, you're so cold-hearted. What? I don't understand what you're talking about. And you'll wake the kids.
As I said this, our eldest daughter Emma woke up, and 3-year-old Betty started crying.
You told Mom not to use water or electricity. Mom was shivering in a dark and cold room without the lights or air conditioning. What? Do you have any idea who we owe our lifestyle to? I didn't think you were such a person.
As I hugged the crying Betty, I recalled the situation. I had never said such a thing to Mary, and this house wasn't even built by Mike.
Mike, I didn't say that. I only asked her to help save water and electricity a bit more. Then it must have been the way you said it. Mom was really upset by how harsh you were. No, that's not true.
I was foolish to believe that Mary had agreed. Mary had lied to Mike. And he believed her over me.
Sarah, apologize to her. What? Mom is forgiving. She'll accept your apology.
Why do I have to apologize? Tears welled up in my eyes. But it seemed I had no other choice. Mary would make sarcastic remarks to my face and lie to Mike behind my back. I endured Mary's behavior day after day, wondering how long this would continue. As the year-end approached and the weather turned colder, work took a break and Mike went out shopping. Mary had also gone out, saying she was meeting friends. For the first time in a while, I enjoyed a peaceful afternoon with the children. We spent time reading picture books and drinking cocoa, when I noticed something white falling outside the window.
Emma, Betty, it's snowing,
I said, and both Emma and Betty ran to the window, shouting with excitement. Mom, can we make a snowman?
I want to make one too. Maybe by morning it will have accumulated enough to make a big snowman together.
The children clapped their hands and jumped up and down in joy. Suddenly, Emma stopped and pointed outside. Emma?
Mom, it's Grandma and Dad.
I sighed inwardly. They were back already. Before Mary could start complaining again, I decided to start preparing dinner. Just as I got up, the front door burst open with a loud bang.
Sarah!
Mike's angry voice filled the house.
What? What's going on?
Confused, I ran to the front door.
What's wrong? Why did you lock Mom out of the house? What?
In this freezing weather, what if she got sick? What?
Mary walked past us, wiping away tears as she entered the house.
Sarah kicked Mom out. What? I thought Mary was out with her friends. Don't lie. She said you threw her out. I didn't do anything like that. She said you refused to let her in no matter how much she knocked. I'm telling you, I didn't do that. Sarah, you were against living with Mom, right? But this treatment is too much, don't you think? What?
How did it come to this? As we argued at the front door, Emma and Betty came outside.
Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? Nothing, it's cold, so let's go inside.
Just as I was about to say that, the door suddenly closed in front of me.
What? Get out! What? Go cool your head. Wait a minute. This is my house.
We're married, so it's my house too. It seemed I was being thrown out into the cold with just the clothes on my back. It wasn't just me, but my young children as well. Finally, I understood. Those two just wanted to get rid of me and take over the house. I realized how foolish I had been. The only people I could turn to were my uncle and his wife. In the snowy evening, dressed inadequately for the cold, we trudged desperately toward my uncle's house. The surroundings grew darker, and the snow fell more heavily. Under different circumstances, the children would have been delighted by the snow, but now they were crying as they walked. When we finally reached my uncle and his wife's brightly lit house, I couldn't hold back my tears.
Bob, Mike threw us out.
Bob responded.
I knew it. Good thing we didn't file the application. What? Anyway, come inside and warm up. Emma, Betty, you were cold, weren't you? It's okay now.
That night, we stayed at my uncle and his wife's house. I told them everything that had happened. They listened intently to my story. As I wondered what to do next, Bob said,
"Let's go and get your important house back."
We spent the new year at Bob's house, enjoying a peaceful time. After that, although I was reluctant, I decided to return home temporarily. Leaving my children with my aunt, I headed to the house with Bob in his car. Parking in the driveway, I walked alone to the front door and rang the bell.
Yes?
Mike answered. It's Sarah.
Sarah? Where have you been? Have you reflected on your actions?
Reflect on what exactly? After a moment, the door opened and Mike stepped out, holding a piece of paper.
If you don't understand, there's no point. A wife like you should just leave.
He handed me a divorce application.
Sign this divorce paper.
I couldn't help but laugh. We can't get divorced.
What do you mean? If you divorce me, you'll just be a middle-aged woman with 2 kids and 2 divorces. You'll never get married again. If you just apologize, I'll forgive you.
We're not even married.
What?
I'm not your wife or anything.
What?
We never registered our marriage.
But the marriage license.
We didn't submit it.
What?
So we're not married.
No way!
The company president who was supposed to submit it for us lost it.
No!
While the part about losing the marriage license was a lie, it was true that we never submitted it. Mike was speechless, his face turning pale. At that moment, Bob arrived.
President!
Mike, I'm sorry. It was my mistake. I lost the marriage license.
No way!
I'm truly sorry. But I heard some rumors about you, Mike. So I didn't submit it right away and decided to wait and see.
Rumors?
I heard that you're paying alimony and child support after a divorce. You never told Sarah that you had children from a previous marriage, Did you?
How did you?
I have connections at the company Mike used to work for, so I asked around.
What?
It would have been fine if he just came to work for my company, but marrying my beloved niece is a different matter.
What?
Didn't Sarah tell you? Sarah's father is my brother.
What?
You targeted Sarah because she had a house, didn't you? Just to make things easier for your mother.
What's wrong with trying to be a good son? Stealing someone else's happiness isn't being a good son. You're the one who needs to cool down. Get out of her house. Hey! Sarah, you tricked me. How rude. If you two had managed to live peacefully, I would have submitted the papers after discussing it properly. But weren't you the one deceiving Sarah? Damn it!
Mike, on the verge of tears, tore up the divorce application in his hands. Thanks to Bob, my children and I were able to reclaim the house my late husband had left for us. Mike and my MIL, well, she's not really my MIL anymore, left the house. They rented a cheap apartment together. I heard that he quit his job on his own and now lives off day labor while searching for a new job. His life is tough because he's paying alimony and child support for his previous marriage. On top of that, his mother has a spending problem, making it impossible for him to keep up, no matter how hard he works. She wasted a lot of utilities at our house, but it wasn't intentional. She did the same even when it was just her and Mike. Shortly after Mike left the company, I also decided to quit my job. I didn't want the rumors spreading at work, but more importantly, I wanted to spend more time with my children. I felt bad for Bob, but he supported my dream. I started working from home as a handmade children's clothing designer. Initially, I registered on handmade selling sites and participated in events, which were well received. I then opened an online shop and even got my clothes sold on consignment in stores. Now, I'm preparing to start a company with him, learning the ropes from him. Emma and Betty will soon outgrow the clothes I make for them. But someday, I hope to dress my grandchildren in them. With that dream in mind, I lead busy but happy days. I'm Linda, a 32-year-old housewife, enduring the callous treatment from my husband Ronald, who has lost his affection for me, all for the sake of our 7-year-old son, Paul. Despite my efforts, my mother-in-law Sarah, who dotes on Ronald, remains cold towards me.
The audacity to marry when you can't even prepare a simple meal properly, she scoffs.
Ronald, disregarding me, engages in an affair. My wife has lost her femininity, he remarks. To make matters worse, Sarah sells the house that Grandpa had given me, for a mere $200,000.
Your house sold for $200,000. Divorce Ronald and disappear now, she demands.
However, it is Paul's presence that keeps me going through these trying times.
Don't worry, Mom. I have a good idea, he reassures me.
I cannot allow myself to wallow in despair forever. For the sake of a brighter future with Paul, I must stay strong. Even if I regret it later, I won't forgive them now. My name is Linda. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Ronald, who is the same age as me, and our 7-year-old son, Paul. If only I were living a blissful, picture-perfect life, how wonderful would that be? Unfortunately, my life is far from the word happiness. Ronald and I were colleagues at a small company. As we worked together and shared our struggles, we developed a deep connection. At least, that's what I believed at the time.
With you, who shares the same values as me, I feel like I could spend my life together, he had said.
His words filled me with joy, and I decided to marry him. Our courtship was brief, lasting only about 6 months, but it didn't matter to me. I believed that our relationship was strong enough to compensate for the short time we had spent together. When I told Grandpa about our marriage, he was so overjoyed, as if it were his own happiness. Perhaps that's why he gave us a house and land to live together, for Ronald and me. It was a place filled with memories of him living with Grandma, and so I vowed to Grandpa that I would find happiness there. And so, we got married, believing that a blissful life awaited us. But that didn't happen. Shortly after our marriage, the happy life I had hoped for gradually began to stagnate. I don't know if there was a direct reason for it, but Ronald slowly lost his affection for me. At his request, I became a housewife so that I could focus on household chores. I devoted myself to housework for the sake of him, who was working hard for both of us. However, he grew colder towards me, despite my efforts. The words of appreciation that were there in the beginning gradually disappeared. I realized it had become definitive after I gave birth to Paul. When I heard stories about husbands changing after childbirth on social media or somewhere, I couldn't believe it. I thought it would never happen to us. "I think I'll pass on being with you for a while," Ronald said. He started clearly refusing to have time with me. At first, I wanted to believe it was because he was being considerate of our child. Or maybe he was just too tired from working overtime and wasn't in the mood. But then one time, when Ronald came home late, I noticed something.
Huh? I don't smell any sweat on him.
Usually, when I got close to Ronald, I could faintly smell his sweat, but that day, I couldn't. It meant that he had a chance to wash away his sweat somewhere. It didn't take me long to realize that he had an affair with someone somewhere and took a shower afterward so I wouldn't notice. And the days I couldn't smell his sweat increased as Paul grew older. Even though I noticed his infidelity, I couldn't bring myself to confront him about it. Paul was still young, and if we were to get divorced, I couldn't say anything when I thought about that. There was another reason why my idea of marriage was slipping away from me. It was the presence of my mother-in-law, Sarah. Sarah disliked me. You could even say she hated me. Because Sarah doted on Ronald excessively. I was harassed for not being good enough for Ronald. Maybe it was to fill the loneliness of my father-in-law passing away a little while ago. But even so, Sarah would shower me with merciless words as I agonized over it.
The audacity to get married when you can't even cook such simple meals.
During the day, she would visit our house and continue to berate me. Can't cook, bad at cleaning, bad at raising a child. The complaints about me were unbelievably endless.
I feel sorry for Ronald, being married to a woman like this.
At first, I honestly reflected on myself and tried to obey, since they were the words of his mom. But as the words piled up, I started to realize how light her scolding was. It became clear to me that it was just a way to pick on me, just idle complaints, when she said those words about Paul.
Because Linda is no good, Paul is an idiot too.
Even without a parent's favoritism, Paul was a smart and kind child. When I'm feeling down about something, he notices and asks me, "What's wrong?" There's no way such a he could be an idiot.
That's not true. Paul is a smart and kind child.
I wonder about that. Ronald was much smarter when he was a child. Even when I objected, Sarah wouldn't accept my words. I can endure it when it's about me. But I can't stand it when she says bad things about Paul. So I tried talking to Ronald about her. Hey, about Sarah. It pained me to feel like I was tattling, but I thought Ronald would at least listen seriously if it was about Paul. With that in mind, I talked to Ronald when he came home from work, but I was easily betrayed.
If Mom says so, she must be right. It's all because of the way you're raising him, Linda.
The only words that came out of Ronald's mouth were in defense of Sarah. And he was laughing with a silly expression on his face. There wasn't a hint of seriousness on Ronald's face, even though it was about his own child. As such incidents piled up, I started to become mentally ill day by day. I would just cry where no one could see me, because it was so painful. "Mom, what's wrong?" Every time Paul worries about me and calls out to me, I'm reminded that I can't go on like this. I tried my best to smile, at least so that Paul wouldn't worry. And thinking that I wanted him to laugh regardless of what was happening to me, I told Paul many fun stories. At first, they were fairy tales with happy endings. But I only knew a few fairy tales like that. So after a while, I started adding my own twists to the fairy tales I knew. Still feeling like it wasn't enough, before I knew it, I started creating stories from scratch.
Mom, your stories are so interesting.
You think so?
I love how, in the end, all the bad guys are defeated and all the good guys are smiling.
Yeah. I wish everything could really be like that. Reality is full of painful things. So I wanted at least the world that he knew to be filled with happiness. I was weaving stories with those feelings in mind.
I wish Mom's stories could become picture books.
Huh?
Then everyone could smile too, I'm sure.
Paul's unexpected words made my eyes light up. A picture book author, or a novelist. It might be presumptuous for someone like me to aspire to that, but
yeah, that would be wonderful.
If I could at least dream, by holding on to those thoughts, I somehow endured the painful days. Hoping that someday, Ronald and Sarah would change their minds. But reality was just as harsh as ever.
Talking with Elizabeth is so much fun after all. She's totally different from Linda.
One Sunday, as I returned from shopping, those words reached my ears. I knew that Ronald no longer had any intention of looking after Paul. So I often left Paul with my parents. That day too, I had left Paul with my parents in the morning and was taking care of accumulated shopping and errands. I'd go pick up Paul after putting away the shopping bags. And the moment I returned home, I heard Ronald's words. Not noticing that I had come back, Ronald continued talking loudly to someone on the phone. Linda just isn't feminine anymore, you know? What spilled from his mouth was abuse towards me. And at the same time, praise for Elizabeth, the woman he was having an affair with on the phone. Those were words that had once been directed at me, and as I listened from behind a corner, my chest just ached. I was made to realize that those words were no longer words of love for me. At the same time, I felt the affection I still barely had for Ronald disappearing. Ronald was no longer the husband I had married, but had become someone else. That's why I was able to calmly remember the various bits of information that came up in the conversation. The woman named Elizabeth apparently works at a certain bar. If I just knew the name of the bar, there were various things I could do. I could talk to her about what to do going forward, and it would be easier to hire a private investigator. It was a complicated situation, but I thought that maybe I could turn things in a good direction. I held on to that faint hope. Sometime after learning about Ronald's blatant affair and the woman he was seeing, I left Paul with my parents and headed to a certain place. It was the bar where Elizabeth worked. Ronald would probably stop by there today too. I had re-examined the days he tended to come home late and predicted the day he would definitely go to the bar. I thought I would barge in there, or follow him, and catch him red-handed in his affair to give myself an advantage. By doing that, I could proceed with a divorce and start a new life with just Paul and me. I was thinking that, when, on the other side of the small crosswalk where I had stopped, there was Ronald. Had he not stopped by the bar? Was he planning to go after taking care of something else? I couldn't think about those things in that moment. Ronald was operating something on his smartphone, proceeding forward while still not paying attention to what was in front of him. The light was still red. A car comes barreling towards him there.
Watch out!
The affection I had for Ronald in my heart had certainly grown cold. But I didn't want him to disappear from this world. So I reflexively ran and shoved Ronald's body out of the way. Instead, a strong impact ran through my body. Before I could feel any clear pain, I lost consciousness. Where am I? I regained consciousness on a hospital bed. Mom, I'm so glad. Paul. Paul was right next to me, holding my hand. I was crying at the thought of never being able to see Paul again.
I'm really glad, Linda.
Grandpa. I'm sorry for causing trouble for Dad and Mom too. Around the bed where I lay were my grandparents and parents. Apparently, I was lucky enough to only have minor injuries. Everyone was happy that I only needed to be hospitalized for about a month. But Ronald was nowhere to be seen in the hospital room. He couldn't get away from work, that was his excuse apparently. Even though I had saved his life, while everyone else was feeling angry, I was somehow calm. Knowing about his affair, I couldn't think any other way. It was refreshing to clearly know how he felt. Thinking that, I spent my hospital stay entrusting Paul to my parents and grandparents, and then one day, a week before I was finally set to be discharged.
Why from Sarah?
Suddenly, I got a call from Sarah on my smartphone. Until now she had never once come to see me while I was hospitalized. I couldn't possibly think she regretted that. I answered the phone with a vaguely bad feeling. Is this Sarah?
So you were still alive? How lucky for you.
My faint hope that she would thank me for saving Ronald's life was quickly betrayed.
You did something unnecessary. Ronald was laughing about how he could have avoided that accident, and that Linda who got hurt for no reason is an idiot.
I was so astounded by Ronald and Sarah's cruel way of speaking that I couldn't say anything. But Sarah said something that made me lose my words even further.
But thanks to that, I was saved. Because I could search the house slowly. What do you mean?
True to my words, I didn't understand what Sarah was saying. To me, Sarah piled on even more words.
I'm saying I have no more use for you. So, what are you talking about? I can finally say it. Your house sold for $200,000. Divorce Ronald and disappear now.
I was speechless at those unbelievable words. My mouth twitched and I couldn't even string together words. That's how much of a shock it was.
Ronald was happy too. That he could finally cut ties with you and marry a wife suitable for him.
So they were in on it together? I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it. That house, that land, Grandpa had given it to us for our happy life together. And they sold it without permission? I was so shocked that no words came out and I could only move my mouth. But I couldn't stay like that forever. That house is the place for Paul and me to return to. Having collected myself, I somehow managed to string together words.
What do you mean? That house is for our family. It's also the house of your grandson Paul.
But the words I squeezed out weren't enough to sway Sarah. Sarah scoffed at my words and said bluntly,
I don't need a grandson who doesn't take to me. You and Paul can just go live happily together somewhere.
The retort I had built up inside me was blown away by her cruel words that lacked any human compassion.
Well, I'll at least thank you for giving us the $200,000.
And with that, the call from Sarah ended, leaving me at a loss for words once again. What in the world, what should I do? There's no way they could suddenly sell the house like that. Could it be that they had been plotting to sell it for a long time? If so, then me being hospitalized and leaving Paul with my parents, resulting in the house being empty, was very convenient for them. It was a great opportunity for them to thoroughly search for the land and house deeds. That must be it. I don't want to let them do as they please with our house. But I had no idea what to do or how to go about it. At my wit's end, I reached for my smartphone and made a call. It was to Paul, who should have been at my parents' house. Mom, who answered the phone first, must have sensed that something had happened. She asked me worriedly if something was wrong. I told Mom I'd explain the situation later and had her pass the phone to Paul.
Mom, thanks for calling. You're getting discharged soon, right?
Paul spoke to me in such a happy voice. It made me so happy, and yet my chest ached terribly at the thought of making that voice sad now. Even though I had told him so many stories because I didn't want that to happen. But it's something I'll have to tell him eventually. Carrying feelings of apology and pain, I desperately tried to string together words while thinking of how to hurt Paul as little as possible. You know, Paul.
I can be discharged, but our house, your dad and grandma.
Even as I thought it is pathetic. I couldn't string the words together well. But what Paul said to me then was unexpectedly far beyond my imagination.
About the house? It's okay. I have a good idea. Huh?
A clear, bright voice. I'm glad Paul isn't sad, but honestly, I have no idea what he means. Probably trying to encourage my confusion, he told me in a voice that I could tell he was smiling.
Dad had been talking on the phone about doing something with the house for a while now when he was home.
So they had been plotting to sell the house for a long time after all. I was ashamed of my own carelessness for not noticing it at all. Maybe I had been too preoccupied with the thought of divorce.
So I thought it would be a problem if we lost the house, and I tried talking to great-grandpa about it. And then,
he was trying his best to explain it to me. But it must have been difficult for him to fully explain all the details about the land and the circumstances of adults. I could hear my mom's kind voice saying,
I'll explain,
from the other end of the phone. It might not have been the right situation, but I felt comforted by their exchange. As my frantic heart calmed down, Paul told me firmly, albeit clumsily.
So Mom, there's nothing for you to worry about. Just focus on getting better at the hospital and come home.
My chest just grew hot with his kindness. Wiping away the tears that had started flowing without me noticing, I told him, desperately trying to suppress my trembling voice so as not to worry him further.
Yeah, I'll definitely come home. Just wait a little bit longer, okay? Yeah.
I felt like I got the greatest energy and courage from his lively response. I can't stay down forever. I have to do my best for a bright future with him. And everything that my mom explained to me about what had happened so far seemed to support my determination. 1 week later, I was discharged from the hospital as scheduled and headed home, greeted by Paul, my parents, and Grandpa. I'm so glad. There, looking up, was our house, unchanged. The flower beds and modest decorations I had made to liven up the house were still there, and I felt truly relieved. They must have sensed my relief.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Paul said that and held my hand tightly. Paul, who had just started elementary school not long ago, seemed to have grown up so much more than I thought, and I felt like I might cry. My parents and Grandpa seemed to be tearing up too, following suit. What's wrong? Seeing us crying, Paul made a worried face. Gently stroking Paul's head, I said,
It's okay. We're not crying because we're sad. You know, sometimes people cry when they're happy too.
Really? Is that true?
To tell you the truth, as you get older, you end up crying a lot more than when you were a child.
I see. It was in a moment like that, as we were smiling at each other. At the intense ringtone that disturbed the peace, I took out my smartphone. The name displayed was Sarah's.
Who's calling?
It's Sarah. When I answered that, Grandpa's face was filled with anger.
You can ignore it. We'll take care of everything else.
The thought of giving in to those words crossed my mind. Honestly, I never wanted to see Sarah or Ronald again. With that thought in mind, I ignored my ringing smartphone for a while. But then it occurred to me that if I left it alone, this might go on forever. Considering Paul's future, I wanted to settle unpleasant matters quickly and completely. So I signaled to Grandpa and the others with my eyes, gained courage by looking at Paul one last time, and answered the phone. Hello.
Hey, you finally picked up.
On the other end of the phone, Sarah, whom I was speaking to for the first time in a week, sounded not at all at ease. Rather, she sounded so flustered and panicked that I almost laughed a little. Sarah, who couldn't possibly notice my expression, shouted at me.
What is the meaning of this? What are you talking about?
There seemed to be some kind of commotion on the other end of the phone, and it was noisy. Sarah answered in an even louder voice.
Your house, I sold it, so why hasn't it been sold?
Perhaps because she was so confused, Sarah's words were incoherent and hard to understand. So I honestly voiced my thoughts as they were.
I don't really understand what you're saying. I'm saying the house I sold hasn't been sold.
Was she also indignant that I was calm no matter what? Sarah shouted, getting even more emotional.
Just come here. You have an obligation to explain, don't you?
No.
I have no obligation to explain. What?
It must have been an unexpected response. After all, until last week, I could hardly argue back against Sarah's words. But I can't stay silent any longer. From now on, for the sake of my and Paul's future, I'll argue back with all my might.
Rather, it's you who should explain. You tried to sell my house without permission. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. The house is in my name, not Ronald's.
That's right, Grandpa gave us the house, but the title is in my name. At the very least, neither Ronald nor Sarah have the right or qualification to sell the house. Even if they tried to take the documents without permission, that shouldn't waver no matter what. Faced with my resolute rebuttal, Sarah couldn't find the words to respond. Since I have the chance, I'll ride this momentum and settle everything.
Sarah, where are you right now? Is Ronald with you by any chance? At the real estate agent. Because the house I sold hasn't been sold.
I see, so that's why they were causing a commotion, I understood.
This isn't going to get us anywhere, so please come to the house with Ronald.
The real estate agent had done something regrettable. As a result, they got involved in our house's circumstances and caused trouble. I decided in my heart that I would properly apologize to them later, and then I told Sarah.
So that we don't cause any more trouble for the real estate agent. What a way to put it. Fine. I'll make sure to talk to them and have you apologize.
With that, she hung up on me. I conveyed the flow of events to my parents and grandparents and told them of my determination to settle various things today. Then, my parents promised to cooperate if it was necessary for them to be present. Honestly, it felt very reassuring. If it were up to me, it might be something I should end by myself. But since Paul's future is also at stake, I'm sure that borrowing their strength is the surest way to end everything today for certain. That's another reason why I asked them to be present. I was thinking of having Paul leave the room.
I'll help out properly too.
But he kept insisting that he wanted to be with me no matter what. In the end, I accepted his words. But only after making him promise to leave the room if the conversation got too terrible. Before long, Ronald and Sarah and the others arrived at the house. Ronald, Sarah, and even Elizabeth, the woman he was having an affair with. Well, I guess it's not strange if Ronald intends to marry her. Ronald and the others seemed unable to hide their surprise at the presence of my parents and grandpa. Feeling a sense of guilt, or rather, a perplexed expression at the difficulty of the situation, I showed them to the living room. I didn't want to let them in the house, but I had no choice, as I couldn't trouble others by doing this somewhere else.
So, explain what's going on.
In the end, perhaps anger won over confusion, and Sarah spoke first.
I'm sure I sold this house, so why? It seems so. But we had the buyer take a different house. That's all there is to it.
It was Grandpa who answered Sarah's question. To Sarah and the others, who were puzzled by the unexpected response, Grandpa explained. Actually, Grandpa is a landlord who manages several plots of land in this area. Because Paul had consulted with Grandpa about our situation, Grandpa had spoken to the real estate agent in advance. Namely, if a situation arose where they were going to sell this house, they should report it to him. And so, when it actually came to the point of being sold, Grandpa contacted the person considering purchasing the house. He pleaded with them to give up on this house, offering a plot of land not far from here with better conditions at the same price. The prospective buyer agreed, seeing no reason to refuse if the conditions were better. In the end, the sale of this house was cancelled, and Sarah and the others, unaware of this, were rejoicing without realizing it.
That's way too arbitrary. That's right. We were going to have a luxurious wedding and go on an overseas trip with the money from selling the house.
The two voiced their dissatisfaction at Grandpa's explanation. I couldn't stand the two of them.
You're the ones being arbitrary. Aren't you ashamed of selling someone else's house and land on your own and trying to turn it into money?
Elizabeth let out a scream at my intensity and shrank back.
Linda?
On the other hand, Ronald seemed shocked that I, who had always done as he said until now, was defying him. He had a stupid expression on his face, as if he were taken aback. But perhaps thinking that he couldn't stand being beaten, he immediately raised his voice.
There's no reason to be ashamed. That's my house. I explained, didn't I? That house is in my name. You have no right to sell it. Speaking of the house documents, could it be that you were forging them?
No matter how much they say they have documents, if someone with a different name than the titled owner tries to sell the house, naturally someone should stop them. For them to proceed to the point of sale without such a stop, wouldn't it be impossible without forgery? As if it should be expected, Sarah and Ronald's faces turned pale at Grandpa's question.
I'll tell you now, forging documents is a crime. The punishment is severe. Shut up! What's the problem with me selling what's mine?
Despite it being obvious that there were only problems, even at this point, Ronald didn't stop intimidating me.
Linda, you get it, right? You can't live without me. Don't you dare file a lawsuit or anything. That's right, if you sue us or anything, you won't be able to live. That's not true. She is a strong girl. If she puts her mind to it, she can properly live on her own.
That's right. Unlike Dad, who only make complaints. Along with Grandpa's words, Paul also raised his cute and powerful voice.
Mom is strong. She worked hard every day, no matter what.
Oops, since Paul is here too, I guess it's two people. Sorry. The housework and childcare that Ronald had always abandoned. Paul had properly watched me continue to face them. Here are Grandpa's words, he who had watched Paul and me since we were young, and my parents who raised me, nodding vigorously even without words. I had nothing to fear anymore. Ronald and Sarah, whom I had endured so much, seemed weak, as if I had been a fool.
If anything, you're the ones holding Linda back from living happily. It's not embarrassing at all for us to help out a little with the part you've been holding her back on.
Grandpa and my parents were offering to help until I could properly stand on my own. Specifically, taking care of Paul and supporting our life. And I knew it wouldn't be for very long.
And thankfully, I already have a prospect for work. What? You don't know this, but I've been making up various stories and telling them to Paul. And what about it? I got some advice from Paul. I'm thinking of becoming a picture book author.
I can't draw illustrations, but there were a few open calls for just picture book stories. With encouragement from Paul, I applied, and surprisingly, I was selected. I had already received prize money and several job offers. Because I was hospitalized, the progress was delayed a bit, but the editor kindly forgave me.
When I applied for various things, I was given the opportunity to create a book this time. I don't know how it will turn out yet, but I have work for a while.
Then I took a deep breath and said what I hadn't been able to say for so long.
So, Ronald, divorce me. If you don't agree, I'll sue you in court. What? Wait a minute.
At my words, the two were more upset than ever.
Sarah, didn't you tell me to divorce him a week ago? That's...
Sarah must know. If we divorce now, Ronald will have to pay compensation and child support in the divorce trial. I think she believes she can't let her precious son bear such a burden, so she can't let us divorce. But it must have been pretty hard for her to ask me, whom she had looked down on so much. Ronald and Sarah twisted their expressions, looking utterly vexed.
Wait. What about marrying me? And you said you'd give me money too. Shut up. Be quiet for a bit, you stupid woman. What? What's with that attitude? Just because you paid me money, you think you can act all high and mighty if I'm nice to you. Ugh, you're so annoying.
At this point, the three had lost their unity. Why was Sarah approving of Ronald's marriage to Elizabeth in the first place? Maybe Ronald was lying about her occupation or something, but I'm not interested. I simply stated what I had to say.
I'll say it again. Do you want to divorce me, or not agree to the divorce and be sued? Which do you prefer? Hey, Linda. Wait a minute.
At this point, Ronald suddenly softened his voice. His aim was clear. He was trying to get me to show him some compassion. Didn't we love each other so much back then? I've reflected on my actions, so one more time.
You guys, stop messing around already.
Irritated by Ronald's pathetic appearance, I shouted. It must have been more impactful than I thought, because the three were surprised and trembling. To the three of them, I told them without hesitation.
I've been waiting all this time. For you two to reflect on their actions. There's no way I can forgive everything now. So there are no second chances. Now it's either divorce or not. So which is it?
I was wrong. Just don't sue me, please.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Forgive me. The three completely trembled at my intensity and begged for forgiveness. Seeing their state, I felt a sense of relief and regained some composure, saying,
Then let's go with divorce. Of course, I'll properly receive the compensation and child support from the divorce trial. Hey, that's a bit too much. Fine, I got it.
When I glared at Ronald, who was about to complain again, he immediately changed his mind.
All right. Since we've come to an agreement, let's put it in writing. I don't want you complaining later.
After Grandpa wrapped up the conversation like that, the three of them properly signed a written oath. To divorce, to give me custody, to pay compensation and child support in the divorce trial. Everything turned out just as I had hoped. Some time passed after that. After finishing some post-processing, Ronald and I successfully divorced. The fact that the life I thought was so happy at first had completely changed is still a bitter memory even now. But even so, I won't deny that there was a time when I was happy. It's because of that time that Paul was born into this world. So I had no regrets about what had happened. But it seems Ronald and the others weren't like that. It seems Ronald had been paying Elizabeth far more money than I had thought. He had fallen into a state of serious financial shortage, and then the compensation and child support from the divorce trial piled on top of that, making it impossible for him to come up with the money. Elizabeth gave up on Ronald because of the abusive language during the discussion and because he ran out of money. But it seems her boss at the store found out about this incident. That person was a sensible one, and therefore couldn't forgive Elizabeth for causing trouble for a family, so he fired her. And because that person had a strong influence, she could only flee and go somewhere else, unable to work in the surrounding area. The place where Elizabeth told Ronald she was breaking up with him was the lobby of Ronald's company. It became known to those around him that the cause of Ronald's divorce was an affair, causing a commotion. Unbelievably, it seems he had been telling people at the company that he was a devoted husband. As a result, unable to endure the cold stares from those around him, Ronald quit his job and became a shut-in at home. Even for someone like him, it seems it's an undeniable fact that he's still Sarah's precious son. She seems to be working all day to pay the compensation and child support from the divorce trial in Ronald's place. However, troubles never cease due to her personality, and it seems she doesn't last long at jobs. As a result, the mental and physical burden piles up, and it's said that she's been getting into fights with Ronald more often due to stress. I think this is going too far, so I'm thinking of going to give Ronald a proper lecture about working soon. As for us, we're spending peaceful and happy days in the house we managed to avoid selling. The sales of the published picture book are quite good, and I'm relieved that I'll be able to become independent sooner than I imagined. My parents and grandparents love Paul so much that they seem willing to take care of him regardless of that. The happiness I was able to regain thanks to my warm and reassuring family. I think I'll work even harder so that I can share it with everyone.